The Pikmin series, despite being around for almost 25 years now, hasn't had that many games throughout its history. However, one thing it has had a lot of is mods. There are an abundance of Pikmin mods, all of which offer a completely different experience from one another and put a brand new spin on the games they are based on. Now, I've been suggested quite a lot of mods to play, but one of the most requested ones, with hundreds of comments asking for it, is Pikmin 2 Lands of Torture. Pikmin 2 is widely regarded as the hardest game in the series, and while most of the time it's nothing particularly too absurd, most of the time, the game does have quite a lot of threatening enemies and hazards up its sleeve. Pikmin 2 Lands of Torture, as you might be able to guess from the not very welcoming name, ramps up the difficulty tenfold, resulting in a pretty brutal experience. It's similar to Pikmin 2 Kaizo, which you might remember me playing, and that was certainly a game. Kaizo was extremely difficult, and I've heard that Lands of Torture is somehow even more difficult, so I'm certainly in for something. This mod was developed by Balrog and was released back in 2017, making it one of the first full game mods of Pikmin 2. There's not really much else to say aside from rephrasing "it's gonna be difficult" 50 times, so let's stop prevaricating around the bush and delve into Pikmin 2 Lands of Torture. And as always, be sure to subscribe for high quality Pikmin videos weekly. And thank you to Meme Lord for doing the thumbnail of this video. His account is linked in the description and pinned comment. Be sure to follow. You guys won't be that cheerful for long. Right off the bat, the overall setup and plot is almost completely unchanged from the default Pikmin 2. I say almost because some words in the opening cutscene were changed. Instead of Pikmin, they're now Bikmin. While the text is changed, the overall goal stays the same. We have to repay the company's debts by collecting treasures back on PNF 404. We're obviously not stopping there though, we'll be collecting every single treasure this planet has to offer. The president ships off Olimar and Louis, and we get to start our journey. Heading into the Valley of Repose for day 1, Olimar and... that's not Louis, who the fuck is that? Olimar crashes into a branch, and we're separated from our only source of keratin we brought with us. Our goal for day 1 is the same. We have to reunite the captains while also growing up our first batch of Pikmin, who we immediately meet upon landing. You'll notice some immediate differences as soon as you start playing. Both Olimar and the Pikmin move significantly faster, which is a surprisingly nice change. The game also now takes place at night, which is really cool, not only because it looks very nice, but this is a difficult mod, and it's a known and established fact that nighttime is pretty precarious on PNF 404, so it makes sense for it to be nighttime in the very difficult mod. We reconnect our communications with Louis, which I think you might have been able to tell by now that he's just a giant pick carrot for whatever reason. My paternal instincts kick in when I see this little cute carrot waddling around, more so than when I see my actual children. I don't want him to endure the horrors we'll be encountering later on. We run into the onion, which has been moved all the way down here for some reason, and Louis is just delighted to see us. This gives us full access to red Pikmin, and we can start constructing an army. Olimar's description of the creatures resembling pick carrots was strikingly accurate. I mean, you're not wrong, but that's not really a kind way to refer to Louis. Unexpectedly, we do actually have to deal with some enemies on day 1. In the vanilla game, there's usually only this dwarf bulwarp at the start, and the game is programmed to not allow any Pikmin to die via getting eaten until later on in the tutorial. But here, we actually have to fight some fiends. Don't expect much though, there's not too many threatening enemies yet, we'll have to wait about 5 minutes for that. There's also fire geysers on the floor, which can also harm your captains, but if these are the things giving you significant trouble, you're going to be in for a nasty shock later on. Since our red Pikmin are immune to fire, it's obviously no issue for them. Plus, red Pikmin also have the ability of dealing some extra damage. Though, if you've played Pikmin 2, you'd know their combat abilities are greatly outclassed by a certain type of Pikmin. After growing up a few Pikmin, we can weigh down this paper bag and reunite the two captains. From there, we can head back to near where the ship was, and after the game gives us a brief refresh on what snow looks like, we get a glimpse of the first of many treasures across our journey. The highly coveted Duracell battery doesn't weigh too much, now needing 30 Pikmin instead of the usual 20, but we're going to hold off on collecting it for a good while to focus on gathering some more Pikmin, as I have a hunch we might be needing a few. Something that does definitely weigh is the other paper bag, needing 90 Pikmin. That's more than twice of what it originally weighed. This hairy Bulborb is the most significant threat as of now, and while the mod does have him revive health, and fairly quickly at that, similar to the vanilla game, he's fairly weak. He did manage to claim the first casualty though. Rest easy, soldier. You at least had the privilege of dying before you eventually get completely desensitized to us. The game graciously gifts us with 2 burgeoning spiderworts, granting us 5 of each kind of berry, ultra spicy and ultra bitter. These give us their respective sprays, and I already know these will be extremely useful. Spicy spray boosts a Pikmin's speed and attack for around 40 seconds, and bitter spray turns enemies to stone for a while, which is good for preventing deaths and crowd control. However, this is really the only bone the game is going to throw us. Unlike Kaizo, where you only needed 3 berries for 1 spray, allowing you to farm them up extremely easily, here you need the usual 10. Along with that, the day duration is the standard 13 minutes, and there's no get Pikmin quick schemes. Day 1 here is definitely slower paced, and while if this was a normal Pikmin game or mod, that'd probably irk me a bit, here, take as long as you want, I don't mind. It feels more like the calm before the storm than a tutorial. Well, maybe I was also being a bit too slow paced as I left some of my Pikmin in the ground for too long and they turned into Bud Pikmin. What's wrong with Bud Pikmin? That's wrong with Bud Pikmin. Bud Pikmin usually move a bit faster than Leaf Pikmin and would be completely forgettable if it wasn't for merchandise, but here they jolt all over the place like a scourge of crack addict mosquitoes. While this is funny, it's also not very helpful. At least there's some eggs near the spiderworts so we can have them drink some nectar and turn into flower Pikmin. Oh, what the fuck? Well, that was a complete disaster and also a clear showcase of why we want to avoid Bud Pikmin. Look how far and high they were able to blast off to. We didn't get any nectar from that, but there's still some eggs here, so it's not that big of a oh, would you stop? I was hoping for most of our squad to get flowers here, but only 2 of them did, and the only thing most of our squad got was permanent head trauma. Flower Pikmin thankfully move at a much more reasonable pace compared to buds, so they're definitely ideal. I wrap up the day by getting some sprays, 2 spicy plus 2.5 bitters. Our total Pikmin count is now 76, pretty good. Maybe that paper bag won't be too bad after all. We can then finish the day off by collecting our first treasure, worth a whopping 25 Pokos. This ends the day, and a neat detail is that because it was nice, it turns to day as we leave the planet. You found your first bit of treasure! Heh, bad work. That was quite an eventful day, and it was day 1. It's only getting worse from here. If the tutorial has taught us anything, it's that there is never a dull moment in this mod, something that will only become more and more apparent as we play. Before day 2 starts, I take care of something extremely important, which is checking the Picklepedia to see if the Pick carrots are now Louis. No, but they are tiny Olimars for whatever reason. Landing back at the Valley of Repose for day 2, we already see the place has become a lot more populated. The onion usually moves back to where your ship is for day 2, but here it just couldn't be asked. This is made very obvious since there's a cutscene that shows you that the onion has moved near your ship in the vanilla game, which ends up being all wrong in this mod, and all it accomplishes is making Olimar stare at a Bulborb for zero reason. We still have our Bud Pikmin, but not to worry, we can just go over to where the eggs were yesterday, and they're fucking gone. At least there's an extra bitter spray spiderworth that's just weirdly overlapped on top of the other one. Since we've moved past the tutorial, the clock has started ticking down every time we are in the overworld, meaning we have 13 minutes to wrap up whatever we need to get done. There's a few enemies by the ship which we saw, but it's nothing too crazy. In fact, it's a clever enough enemy layout. You have to deal with a bumbling snitch bug who can steal your captains and then face off against a Bulborb, but watch out for the little fella behind him on a cliff. It's challenging but pretty fun. Don't worry though, if you want to see some truly insane enemy layouts, they'll be coming up right now because what is this? Forget what I said about this paper bag potentially not being that bad, as there is a Gatling Groink, who mind you is usually a late game enemy, camping right in front of us and can freely fire shots at any Pikmin attempting to weigh it down. How do we even combat this? To try and ward this guy off, I had to throw a Pikmin onto this corner block to serve as base, which is very finicky to pull off. From there, he should be distracted, but if the Groink is too close to the bag, he'll fire from a distance, meaning he'll prioritize you if you try and get close. So I had to walk away and do nothing but watch him meander for a while. After all of that, we can finally break down the bag. I don't even have a comment for that. All of the dwarf bulborbs so far have moved slightly faster, but the dwarf bull bears move slightly faster than the bullet that'll be flying through my skull if these guys are a regular occurrence. The Groink is fine enough to deal with since he's on his own and distracted, but despite being a small goldfish, he weighs as much as a big blubber whale. The mod has been increasing the weight of basically every object except for the pellets, which has only been slightly inconvenient so far. But the Groink weighing 60 Pikmin is ludicrous, especially since they have the mechanic of slowly coming back to life. After collecting another treasure, farming up an additional batch of sprays, and breaking down this wall, we get access to our first cave. If you've played Pikmin 2 or are even just familiar with it, you know that these were where most of that game's difficulty lied. In the overworld segments, which are carried on from Pikmin 1, you mostly focus on optimizing your planning, multitasking, and time efficiency, known as a Dandori. A smaller but important aspect of these days, however, is managing your squad composition, how you use your Pikmin types, and how to avoid losing them in combat scenarios. This branch of strategy never got a fun marketing term, so I'll just call it Squad Dory, because it's Dandori for your squad. You can send me a check by mail, Nintendo. Caves mostly focus on your raw Squad Dory, not allowing you to grow additional Pikmin inside of them, with few exceptions. And there's a pretty big focus on enemy interactions inside of them. This leads to far more punishing gameplay, lots of opportunities to mix and match enemies, and this is likely where we'll see these lands get truly torturous. Approaching the cave, we get hit by a fucking blinding ray that makes the game look like an amateurish source filmmaker animation. Since we've done everything, there's nothing else to do except delve in. The Bud Pikmin are so fast they get disjointed and ruin the fucking illusion of the cutscene. Good job, guys. Despite all my prior explanations of the caves and why they are regarded as difficult, the Emergence Cave, which is the very first cave in Pikmin 2, is really easy in the vanilla game, and even in mods such as Kaizo, it isn't anything too crazy. So, despite the build-up, I doubt the Emergence Cave here will be anything that difficult. Never mind. Large packs of dwarf bulborbs are on every corner, and in the center of it all, there's an Empress Bulblax who is shooting out a large supply of larvae. The only thing this mod doesn't have up its sleeve is foreplay. I mean, I guess I shouldn't have expected anything nice from a layout which uses the final boss arena, but since it was the first floor, I was expecting a slower start. The bulborb larvae move a lot faster, which makes handling them quite difficult. And I was struggling to figure out a way to manage all this. Not to mention there's also some sheer grubs in the arena making things even worse. Our Bud Pikmin aren't helping matters either. If you saw them carrying things quickly on the overworld and thought I was being too harsh on them, stuff like this really shows how they aren't helpful at all. Eventually I come up with the strategy of having one captain sit at the edge of the arena out of harm to bait over the larva, while the other captain deals with the Empress. This was a mostly foolproof strategy, but some larvae would leak over. Not the biggest deal, as you can simply have the Empress roll over them. Thanks to this strategy, after a bit of time, we kill the Empress Bulblax and get the treasure of the floor, the citrus lump. Even better is that the bulborb larvae have a chance to drop nectar, so we are finally able to fully cleanse our squad of Bud Pikmin, which means no more of this nonsense as long as we're careful. Alright, we beat the boss, the floor is over. Nope. Giant metal maze. I know you're probably thinking, why not just run to the end of the maze with a single captain to reach the exit? Unfortunately, the mod we are playing is NOS Pikmin 2 Lands of Moderate Inconveniences, and the game has clogged the holes, so we have to bring Pikmin to it. The maze is filled with dwarf bulborbs, dwarf bull bears, and male sheer grubs, making it quite treacherous to go through. There's actually something I haven't mentioned about the small enemies yet. Since the dwarf bulborbs and sheer grubs are only programmed to bite off one Pikmin at a time, and also have insta-kills on their back, no matter how much the mod could attempt to change them, they can't be that big of a threat to our Pikmin squad. To compensate for this, if they land a hit on your captain, they bite off a full third of their health. You want to be pretty cautious around them, since they can and will destroy your health in the span of a few seconds. This change turns what are usually the simplest enemies to deal with to potentially massive threats that you have to tremble in fear of every time you encounter them. To get through the maze, I bring a small group of Pikmin as it's easier to manage, kill any enemies that are in my way while running past those who aren't. We did lose some Pikmin on this floor, but the maze thankfully has 2 Queen Candy Bop buds located in it, allowing us to get back up to a crisp 100. I'd like to make it clear, all of the stuff we went through there was all within the very first floor of the mod. When we drop into the next floor, we see the layout where we first obtained purple Pikmin in the original Emergence Cave, which is quite a relaxing floor, so maybe the mod will dial things back a bit and give us a break. Unfortunately, the only thing this mod wants to break is our mind, so instead we get Dwarf Bullbear spam, and I really do mean spam. Usually when I say spam, I mean like around 5 or 6 of an enemy in close proximity, not a group of one specific enemy type in such high density nobody would be bothered to count us. You have to gradually chip away at each individual bullbear, separating them from the pack and killing them off one by one. Of course, just when you get used to this and start thinking this floor won't be too bad, buried cannon larvas rear their ugly heads like a wasp ready to terrorize a picnic. You can use them to kill some dwarf bullbears, but at some point you'll have to dive in and take them out, which often just leads to complete havoc. This takes about as long as you think it takes. It is tedious. Then the rotten cherry on top is 3 Emperor Bullblaxes lined up in a nice little row. If you came all the way here expecting purple Pikmin, then tough. I brute force them by spamming red Pikmin, and you might think this wouldn't be that bad to deal with because it's the Emperor Bullblax, a fight that usually lasts all of 10 seconds in the original game, but he has received a very significant health buff in this mod. We have enough red Pikmin on hand to wipe them out fairly quickly, but they are able to get some attacks in, which don't exactly do wonders for our Pikmin numbers. It'd probably be more resourceful to fight them normally the next time we encounter them. So, what's our grand reward for doing all of this? A treasure that we can't even fucking collect. I'm well aware that killing all 3 of them was stupid in hindsight since they all have the same treasure, but putting an impossible to collect treasure inside 2 of the bosses and then having the real treasure of the floor be inside 1 of them sounded like a very real possibility, so I had to check. Also, again with the clogged holes, you are not allowed to skip anything in this mod. Even if you wanted to smuggle a small group of Pikmin there to skip it, not only do you have to have the foreknowledge that this floor is useless, but also good luck trying to bring any Pikmin through here unharmed. This floor took a total of 10 minutes and the last one took 8, so we've been in the Emergence Cave for a total of 18 minutes now, and we haven't even finished it yet. This cave in the vanilla game is like 4 minutes. Olimar and Louie could kill all the enemies, collect every treasure, and eat all of the snow on the floor in the original cave, and all that time combined would only have them at the fucking metal maze in this one. I head to the exits, and both of our captains are on the verge of collapse, so that's great. After dealing with the previous 2 floors, sublevel 3 turns out to be a decent change of pace. The thing you'll notice right off the bat is the floor is littered in dweevils, and the second thing you'll notice is that we finally get purple Pikmin. 1 flower might look a bit disappointing, but it disperses a total of 10 Pikmin, which is double what you usually get. Did I say we unlocked purple Pikmin? I meant to say that we unlocked President Pikmin. Purple Pikmin are still just as good as ever, having access to double damage, their slam attack, and being able to stun enemies. The dweevils do move faster and their stun has been shortened, but they overall aren't much of a threat, and you can clean them up fairly quickly to avoid them stealing any treasures. Lands of Torture also found a way to make the female sheargrub, an enemy that does basically nothing in the vanilla game, into an annoyance. They move around extremely quickly and can push around your squad of Pikmin. There's a neat little detail in Pikmin 2 where the female sheargrubs shove around the Pikmin a small bit. It's actually kinda cute. For this mod, this gets translated into them putting your Pikmin in a chokehold against the wall at breakneck speed. This all culminates into this section here, which is the puzzle from the end of the Bullblax Kingdom. But the fire geysers are replaced with dwarf bulborbs, and there's some sheargrubs who can shove your Pikmin into the water. I haven't brought up the death yet, aside from stating it exists, and you may have seen some treasures give us barely any Pokos. So you might be wondering if the death will be a big issue in this mod. Thankfully it isn't, as several treasures also have hyperinflated values, such as this 7-Up cap that gives us 711 Pokos. Obviously compared to what a bottle of 7-Up would cost you in Ireland, that is very cheap. The dead has actually been increased to 1200 Pokos instead of the usual 1000, but due to the arbitrary prices of everything that randomly skyrocket, it's still not much of an issue. This floor definitely was a challenge, but compared to the last two, it's overall a walk in the park. We finally reached the last floor, and this one definitely makes up for the lower difficulty in the last one, as it is absolutely ridiculous. It consists of stuff. That's the best description I can give it, just a bunch of stuff. There's also quite a lot of boss spam. You know the mod's going to be a fun time when the first cave has a boss count in the double digits. It has a higher boss count than the cave that is meant to be a boss rush in the original Pikmin 2. The Emperor Bulblax was fundamentally a challenging boss in the vanilla game, but what obviously held him back was having a health pool that would break your legs if you tried to dive into it. He has health here and is far more troublesome, especially when there's a bunch of other enemies around him. You usually want to throw a few Pikmin onto his face and then whistle as he jumps. Actually getting all of the Pikmin onto his face though can be harder than it looks. He can also roar, which scares Pikmin and wakes up any nearby Emperors. Or well, it's meant to, this guy just didn't really seem to care for whatever reason. After dealing with two of them, we have the amazing invisible Snagress. Not that bad to deal with, but Louis had such low health that a mere shake required a trip to the emergency room. He has the treasure we need, so that's nice, but there's a bullbear blocking off the tunnel. Good time to show off what Bitter Spray does. What the fuck? Who isn't here? Just as you thought there would be any space or opportunity to breathe on this floor, the segmented Crobster drops down and tells the oxygen that there's no room at the inn. This is a late game boss, by the way, not a boss that should even be within a 10-kilometer radius of the first cave. Disgusting health revival from a boss who spends most of the time here not even fucking participating in the fight he started. We're just in a lose-lose scenario here. If I focus on the Crobster, these snitch bugs kidnap all of my Pikmin and dwindle my squad down to nothing. But if I divert my attention to the snitch bugs, I won't be able to focus properly to avoid the Crobster's attacks. Plus, if we go a bit too far to the left, we wake up another Bulblax. And there's also just all of this waiting for us down here too. This is basically just a nonsense spam floor. Eventually, Olimar just dies. I did reset here as this early in. I wasn't sure if this was going to be something like Kaizo, where resets are essentially necessary to play, and this floor being absolute penis hell scared me into that. But fortunately, resets aren't really necessary for Lands of Torture, and we'll be keeping them to an absolute minimum from here on out. If we fuck up severely past this point, we have to take it on the chin. Attempt 2 is more the same. We have to deal with several Bulblaxes again and face off against the Snagress. At least this time there's a far easier ruse for the treasure to go. Unlike holes, geysers can't be clogged outside of challenge mode, so I immediately book it to the exit as the treasure is being collected. It's the Spherical Atlas which gives us access to the next area, and finally we can leave the cave. 66 Pikmin died. I'd like for it to really sink in that this is the first cave out of a total of 14. When we land on the surface, the ship orders for us to leave, not like I wanted to stay here any longer anyways. I'm glad they changed the president's line here about taking baby steps first, because if he considered any of what we went through baby steps, I'd have some serious qualms about how he may be raising children. We have officially left what I'd consider to be the really early segments of Pikmin 2, which basically teach you how the game works. But the only thing we learned here is that the game wants us dead. This was absolutely relentless. Even this part of the game was chill enough in Kaizo. Since we got the Spherical Atlas, it's time to explore a brand new area, that being the Awakening Wood. If the onion being pushed away from us slightly for no reason wasn't a sign we aren't welcome here, then the bullbear right at the fucking base definitely is. It doesn't even immediately target us, just goes straight over to its dipshit children to drag them into it too. The fight was sloppy and we ended up losing a purple Pikmin because of it, so I decided to keep them away from combat as red Pikmin are much more expendable. Only 3 days in and the mod has me talking like I'm Stalin. Also, if you thought an enemy that revives weighing 60 Pikmin was bad, try AC. It's a good thing I stopped using the purples, as there's a whole battalion of Shearwigs that's near impossible to deal with deathless. And they also got rid of the burgeoning Spiderworts, but to make up for it, there's a Snagret there. All of that though is child's play compared to this nonsense. The groink by the paper bag was already bad enough, but somehow they found an even worse way of utilizing the groink. He's naturally gonna blow the brains out of any Pikmin who dares to touch the wall, so similarly to last time you have to try and bait him over. But unlike last time, your bait here isn't really reliable. You just kind of have to toss a Pikmin over here and hope for the best, and it's practically random how effective it is, as the groink can kill the Pikmin or bounce him too close to the wall. You have to monitor this gate 24/7 until it's broken down, as taking your eye off it for a mere second leads to stuff like this. After quite a meaty chunk of time, the wall is finally down, but due to how high up the groink is, we won't be killing him. However, he is thankfully easy enough to ignore. And while this decorated cannon beetle who shoots homing boulders is annoying, we've definitely seen worse so far. Oh, and we ended up getting bud Pikmin again. Thankfully only a few, but this mod is going above and beyond to take away any source of nectar on the overworld. Both the patch of grass that is usually here and the honey wisp are both missing in action. Anyways, I decided to head down to the next cave, and while the emergence cave was difficult, I'm sure the Hole of Demons won't be. Our first order of business in the Hole of Demons is to leave the Hole of Demons. The first floor has a nice layout, at least nice by this mod standards, and best of all, it has 2 purple candy pop buds right out in the open. Pikmin 2 is programmed to have some purple and white candy pop buds despawn after the amount of Pikmin you have for that respective type has passed 20. This is what made grinding purple Pikmin such a pain in the vanilla game, especially on your first playthrough, because if you go to an easy to reach spot where you think you'll get some purple Pikmin, the game just indirectly tells you to piss off. However, by using just one of the candy pop buds, our total goes up to 19, and we can leave and re-enter the cave to get 20 additional purple Pikmin when we come back, which also basically negates that one purple Pikmin death earlier. The check for having 20 or more purple Pikmin is only run once when you enter the cave. So if we enter while having less than 20 purple Pikmin, all of that cave's purple candy pop buds will stay spawned in. It's a small trick, but it gives us a slight advantage, and we'll be needing all of the advantages we can get for this mod. Thankfully for us, unlike Kaizo, all of the enemies do not come back to life every single time the map reloads, making the overall segments fairly easy to deal with as long as we keep up a relatively fast pace. Anyways, on to actually tackling the first floor, and it's by far the easiest sublevel we've done so far. The rooms are cramped, but it's not very hard to single out an enemy to get rid of them. Plus the 2 main threats here, those being the red bulborbs and creeping chrysanthemums, are absolutely demolished by purple Pikmin, though the game itself was freaking out on this floor for whatever reason. We grab the treasure with not much difficulty and move on. They even gave us some nectar here. This is an uncharacteristically charitable floor. Sublevel 2, however, was most certainly not the easiest floor by far though. We'll ignore whatever jamboree is happening here and focus on a brand new addition, Scales. Scales usually only spawn in the overworld, but there's actually unused data to spawn them inside of caves. What happens when they are spawned in caves? I'm glad you asked. They ruin the entire fucking floor. They show up wherever, and if they spawn in a bad spot, they break the Pikmin's pathfinding. Sometimes things go back to normal if you lower the specific scale causing trouble. Sometimes they don't though, like here. The only way to quickly remedy this is to reset the game. I know I said I'd keep resets to a minimum, but in situations like these, what do you want me to do? Call the fucking scale police? That's the main exception to the reset rule. If something just breaks and it was entirely out of my fault, it's no harm, no foul in my eyes. I'm at least really glad the scales are being introduced so early on though. The scales were out of the way on the second attempt. I know that doesn't look very out of the way, but lowering it created an open path. Now we can focus on the jamboree. As you can see, there's some bread bugs and anode beetles mucking about. Whatever the hell the original treasure was laying around in the sketchy sewer, it looks like we were already beat to the punch on collecting it. The anode beetles usually stay somewhat still, but sometimes they jolt around really fast, making them quite hard to keep up with. Despite being a boss, this giant bread bug isn't the central target. He's only here to be a fucking great addition, and I hope he'll be blessing us with his presence frequently from here on out. The Emperor Bulblaxes also aren't the focus, they're just here for decoration. I wish I was kidding. All of this stuff here is merely the appetizer to whatever this is. There has not been an anode beetle infestation here, there's been a full colonization of the area. Clearing them all out would obviously take forever, and I say that like just clearing some of them out doesn't take forever. I tried to make this section here empty, but then every time I thought it was done, more of them would just migrate over there. We just kind of take a break from trying to clear off the desk to do Olimar's side hustle, which is cleaning the roaches out of people's rooms. Even hired a bread bug to help. After waking this guy up from his nap to inform him how much this operation would cost, he thanked us for our efforts by pulling out a gun. The man at legs is thankfully an easy enough boss if there's cover around, which there is. I said fighting him was easy, but I did not say it was quick. This also takes forever. After a full fucking fortnight, we take him down and have to quickly swoop in to collect the treasure before the bread bug gets any notions. Our reward for all of that work, because the greedy fucker refused to pay, was a floppy disk. Considering the absolute state of his room and how quick he was to draw a firearm, I would have wiped the data clean off of that before selling us, but it is what it is. Alright, time to leave. Oh. This Emperor Bullblax was actually a lot easier to avoid than I was expecting, and we don't actually have to fight any of them as they don't have any treasure and also aren't covered by our cleaning services contract. Mind you, this floor took 15 minutes, not even counting the attempt that went straight to the waste bin, which is well over twice as long as the original Hole of Beasts. Okay. Sublevel tree is absolutely littered with dwarf bulborbs who have hired some Wally-hop bodyguards. Fairly simple floor, just clean up the dwarves with your red Pikmin and bait out the Wally-hops into more open spaces, so you can bash their brains out with purples. If it was just that, that'd obviously be too easy for this mod, so of course there's an Emperor Bullblax thrown in there too, and he has the treasure. But it's frankly a fine enough floor that you can get through easily with some due diligence. Thought that only one Emperor Bullblax wasn't that bad? We hear you loud and clear. 500 Emperor Bullblaxes. Sublevel 4 has more Dwarf Bulborb spam and also absolute Emperor Bullblax pollution. Plus a really weird bread bug who ended up doing whatever this is. Oh shit. At this point, it's blatantly obvious that the game has a weird fascination with the Emperor Bullblax. I figured out that if you spam purples on its face, you can nuke it out of existence, similarly to how the fight usually goes in vanilla Pikmin 2, though here it's a lot more strict. You have to land the slams on his face, which can be a bit finicky, and if you aren't lined up correctly, it can backfire and put your purples in danger. It's also immune to slams during the initial part of its wake-up animation, so I usually throw some red Pikmin first to get around that. After killing so many Emperor Bullblaxes and Bulborbs, I mess around with the bread bug again to see if I can weigh down his spoils with a purple Pikmin. It works, and it's a good thing I decided to take a break to mess around with him because he has the treasure. None of the bosses on this floor have the treasure, nope, it's in this random bread bug, meaning most of what we did on this floor was completely pointless. Heading into sublevel 5, one of the first things I noticed were these weird dust clouds in the sky. I was naturally suspicious, and when I got close to one of them with a lone Pikmin, it turns out these are actually rolling boulders that descend from the heavens to smite us. This is another unused mechanic from Pikmin 2, and it doesn't take much guesswork to find out why these went unused. At the very least, there is a visual cue, so you aren't completely blindsided by them, but you have no way of knowing what direction they're going to come barreling towards you. So approaching them with one Pikmin and having your squad sheltered far away from us, like you're doing a nuclear missile test, is the only practical way of handling them. As you might have noticed, sublevel 5 is a big maze. Which way shall we go? Not that way. I went down here and we were able to quickly find the first treasure of the floor with not that much hassle. It should be smooth sailing from here. If you weren't able to process all of that, you'll be happy to know it wasn't any easier for me to process it while playing. So the dwarf bullbears are so fast they can just whiz up the gate vertically if they feel like it. Then the water rate spawns, which I'm given 3 seconds to try and gauge his location before another dwarf bullbear pole vaults over the wall, and for the grand finale the treasure freaks out even more and causes Pikmin to fall through the floor. That's not even how we get to end the floor, there's still another treasure. The water wraith isn't really the worst, as it's spacious enough here, and we do have access to purples who make it vulnerable, plus he even steamrolls some enemies for us. However, we do almost have an instant as a dwarf bullbear goes on a suicide mission to try and get us rolled over. We're only 2 caves in, and I'm just completely sick of these guys' shit. I had to drop an emergency bitter spray, definitely not the best use of it, but we do get a dose of ultra spicy spray, which is especially handy because I wasted one again. There's a very exploitable oversight in Pikmin 2 where if you run into a spray on the floor and switch captains right before they touch us, that captain will start drinking it and you can bring the other one over to drink it too. This nets you 2 sprays instead of the intended 1. The rest of our time here is spent just clearing out chunks of the maze with nothing too crazy going on. The Hermit Crawmad is pretty notable here as Pikmin 2 has a subtle detail where every Crawmad is randomly different in scale. Here though it's anything but subtle, they're either absolutely enormous or the size of a piece of dust. Aside from having an annoyingly fast lunge though, they function the same. The remaining treasure here is located in the one part of the floor I really didn't want it to be located in, and the only way of dealing with all of this is another bitter spray. There's the other treasure and it looks strikingly familiar, almost as if we just collected it. This brings us to a really fun mechanic in Lands of Torture, duplicate treasures. This one's very self-explanatory. Treasures will be duplicated across one floor. You don't need to collect duplicates, you only need one of a kind, so these are pointless and we have no need to collect them. There's no real way of knowing if and when a treasure on a floor will be duplicated, so they can waste a lot of time. And because that treasure was a duplicate, most of what we did on that floor was, you guessed it, pointless. Oh, it's fake. We finally reached the end of the cave. I know it doesn't look very long, but man do some of these sublevels drag on. This floor is a fight against the Empress Bulblacks, but we have to deal with some enemies on our way to the fight. But they're Bulborbs who are very easily dealt with by purples, unless you suck. I wasted a bitter spray to save these guys, which wasn't even needed for reasons we'll get into soon. There's some dwarf Bulborbs in the arena, and I already know from Kaizo that the Empress can get stuck on their corpses, so I take precautions to clear them out of the arena. A more subtle change that Lands of Torture makes is that the radius of which Pikmin will go to attack something is greatly increased for several bosses, which can easily be seen here. This is obviously annoying as they will just run to slap a boss silly when they're supposed to be doing something else, and you want to be pretty trigger happy with your whistle around bosses because of this. The fight against the Empress Bulblacks itself is pretty easy. This is the version of the Empress that sleeps and doesn't shit out any children, so we only have to worry about dodging her rolls. We already had a worse fight against her in the previous cave, so it's natural that this one wasn't much trouble. Oh. Now, in this cave, you typically get the treasure gauge, an extremely helpful upgrade that lets you locate where treasures are, and also if a sublevel has any treasures left. We don't get it here, so we won't be having any of those benefits until we stumble upon wherever the mod felt like putting us. There are some tactics to remedy this. There's a noise that will always play if you clear a floor of treasure. Also, the Pikmin will hum a 3-note song if there's treasure on the floor, and hum a 6-note song if there isn't. Definitely the more useful cue, as it can help us immediately identify if a floor has no treasure and isn't worth our time. Sadly, there is no remedy for finding where the treasure is without the gauge, so we'll be spending quite a while on several floors, which we've already witnessed. We do at least get an upgrade, which is the Rush Boots, allowing us to move faster, and it makes our captains immune to being knocked over by puffy blowhogs. Looks like this mod won't be much of a challenge anymore. Overall, I found the Hole of Demons to be a smidge easier than the Emergence Cave, but don't get it twisted, that doesn't mean it was easy. Place your purple Pikmin in the lake until they drown, and you are left with only 19. Head into the Hole of Demons and throw your Pikmin into the flowers to get 20 more. It's almost as if you hadn't lost any purple Pikmin in the first place. This trick is nice because until we encounter the next batch of purple flowers, purple Pikmin are actually pretty expendable for now, as we can always get back up to the maximum amount of them. Considering the next cave was going to be the White Flower Garden or whatever the hell the mod is going to call this, I decided to grow up some red Pikmin as we'll be needing to turn some of them into white Pikmin. There's a doodlebug over here which allows us to replenish our bitter supply as he drops 2 doses, and with the duplication glitch we can turn that into 4. Along with that, if you head over here and ignore him, you'll also find a Flimpeel which gives you a dose of spicy spray. After that we are pretty low on time, so I just decided to call it wraps. Our main goal for day 4 is obviously to head over to the other cave and also to grab the geographic projection, which grants us access to the next area. I was dreading this paper bag here as it is right next to the groink, but I guess he came into work with a hangover as he just wasn't feeling it today. Then we get to see our next cave, and we also get to see the color purple. This cave is called the Hidden Gassy Garden. No comment. On the way, I noticed that rather peculiarly, there was a bumbling snitch bug next to the one blue Pikmin at the onion. You know, I wonder if I could just... Yep. Now we have blue Pikmin, way earlier than we are supposed to have them. Blue Pikmin don't do much aside from being able to enter water, and having them opens up a lot of the game now. Louis is locked behind this fence, unlucky for him, but simply delving into this cave will cause him to warp right back to us. This will also bring the blue onion to our base. Sublevel 1 of the Hidden Gassy Grotto is very similar to the first floor of the Hole of Demons, except infinitely more obnoxious. Each section of this floor is extremely cramped and the poison pipes aren't helping matters at all. Plus the main enemies here are the Wallyhops, who have a good amount of range and can crush Pikmin. This is where we get white Pikmin, and I'm going to do the same trick I did with purples, however this time it nets us 19 additional white Pikmin. However, even just dashing straight for the flowers is inconvenient because of this enemy layout. I was originally planning to go right back into the Hidden Gassy Grotto, but blue Pikmin being unexpectedly thrown into the mix made me mess around with them for a while. There's a glitch in Pikmin 2 where if you reload the map, every segment of a bridge past the first one has its health set to 0. I did forget that this doesn't apply to the first segment, so my sneaky shortcut of throwing a singular blue Pikmin at it wasn't quite the insane time save I was hoping for. I said earlier that the mod doesn't respawn every enemy when the map reloads, but there are a few that do, mostly pretty small enemies. This allows us to grow up a few blue Pikmin, and surprisingly, the Doodlebug and Flint Beetle are part of the enemies that respawn on every reload, allowing us to grab 2 spicy sprays and 4 bitter sprays each time. I'm not sure if this was a mistake or a random act of kindness from the mod, but I'm not complaining either way. I took a detour to this segment here, which is usually a simple puzzle for white Pikmin, but the Cannonball here definitely complicates things. I was expecting this to be unbearable, but surprisingly it's actually pretty fun and kind of a clever enemy layout. Speaking of white Pikmin, I was so eager about getting blue Pikmin earlier that I completely glossed over them, but they're pretty cool. They have all the abilities you expect them to have. They can uncover hidden treasure, are immune to poison, and also move really fast. Since the Pikmin were already faster for this mod, they move and carry things extremely quickly, so they will definitely be a useful asset for our squad. Since the bridge is built, we can pick up the geographic projection, but we'll have to be pretty careful since the creeping chrysanthemum there has been replaced with nothing. There's also a scale puzzle we could access now, but the captain can't actually get on the scale like I thought they could. So I had no clue what to do and just gave up because we were running low on time. After collecting those treasures and cultivating a total of 40 blue Pikmin, which isn't too shabby considering most of the enemies here weren't spawned in, the only thing left to do is to head back to the Hidden Gassy Garden. The first floor is annoying for all of the aforementioned reasons, but still isn't the worst. Signaling out every individual enemy and killing them with purples while taking some time very effectively deals with the sublevel. Plus it's also made slightly easier as we have immediate access to white Pikmin that can shut off the poison pipes, giving us a lot more room to navigate. There is also a bread bug here who would have been an issue if he stole the treasure due to the layout of this floor, but thankfully he approached us in a shady alleyway where we could freely jump him. Sublevel 2 is kind of a boss gauntlet, but naturally it can't just be a boss gauntlet, it has to be covered in dwarf bulborbs that we have to clean up. Why does every boss in this mod have to make their residence in a complete shithole? Can you guys just not live somewhere that isn't filthy for once? Does all of this clutter not bother you? The 2 bosses we have to face here are an Emperor Bullblax and a Burrowing Snagrus, who we are no stranger to at this point. Well, that's all the bosses I can see. Can we leave now? Make that tree bosses, I guess. The beady Longlegs decided to make a guest appearance. The beady Longlegs moves a lot more sporadically, as you could probably tell. He has a lot more health and also pretty fast health regeneration, making this fight pretty long, especially because we don't have any yellow Pikmin who would be able to reach him easier. Despite taking quite a while though, the fight was fairly easy and we managed to do it deathless. Going into sublevel 3, we immediately get to try out a new form of gambling. Will we get a spray drop from the pack of dwarf bullbears?
Failure.
This floor also really makes me wish we had purple Pikmin earlier in the Emergence Cave. I mean, just look at this. Oh, just one Snagris. That can't be that bad. Nope, there's fucking 4 of them. The best way to deal with this is to split them off one by one, but this is mostly luck-based. Sometimes there'll just be several Snagrits at once, and there's nothing you can do about it. Feel free to just leave if that happens. They also have a lot of knockback, so avoid letting them shake off your Pikmin, or you'll wake the whole nest up. Pikmin deaths are obviously pretty inevitable here, but if you use that strategy, you should make it out of here relatively unharmed. Then for the icing on the cake that's filled with glass shards is another pack of dwarf bullbears loitering around this clogged hole. This area could really benefit from more institutions for young people to hang around. Purple Pikmin save the day again, just stand still, throw them, and the bullbears will drop like flies. The poison pipe is annoying, but just stand a bit away from it and be ready to draw your whistle like it's the Wild West. Sublevel 4 is another maze. Yeah, it's amazing how I can even tolerate these. We might as well have this mod renamed to Pikmin 2 Mazes of Torture if this trend continues. Sorry if I sound like a Debbie Downer, but I don't know how I'm meant to sound cheerful when we are in a massive floor that has enough creatures in it that if they were cooked and served, it would single-handedly end world hunger for a decade. Even when you think there's empty space, oh look at that, there's a Snagris. I guess that one breadbug we killed earlier called for backup before his untimely demise, as there are breadbugs everywhere here and they are relentless. Spamming purple Pikmin near them is the best way to deal with them, as they get stunned slightly when you do it. Technically there is no treasure inside of any enemies on this floor, but in practice the survival ointment will always be inside the breadbugs unless you somehow make a mad dash to it as soon as you land. It's also duplicated a lot on this floor, but this is actually beneficial as it means we can kill the breadbugs indiscriminately to get the treasure. That is, if it doesn't get stolen again. We can finally grab one of the treasures in peace and, oh, just grab it and go. We can finally get one of several pieces of lip balm. What a really valuable item. I'm glad it cost us so much Oi, that's mine! Get off of it, you dickhead! No! He ended up being able to amass every single bit of lip balm. What do you even need that for? Naturally, the other treasure spawned in the one spot I really didn't want it to. Not too much to say about the rest of the floor aside from the fact that I'm glad we have bitter spray. Sublevel 5 throws us into the Snagrit arena, except there's enemies all around us, which obviously clearing them all out takes a while, but purples make light work of it. This is all just the setup for the real challenge, however, that being one Snagrit. Couldn't even get it pileated. Who does this little hatchling think he is, acting like the Grand Master of this place as if we haven't beaten his kind to a pulp at least 20 times in this cave alone? Get out of here! He gives us the knapsack, which allows us to lie down and have a Pikmin bring us back to base, or up a wall because the developers didn't test it that much. Where am I? So the final floor here is just littered with fire and tough enemies, but it's actually a filler floor, meaning there isn't any treasure here. All we have to do is just leave, which isn't that tall of a task aside from dodging a few bombs. With that, the hidden gassy garden is finished. So far, out of all the caves, I found this one to be the easiest, with sublevel 4 being the only real troublesome floor. The other ones were fairly manageable by this game's standards. Even the one with 4 Snagrits was surprisingly not the worst. With that, I've done all I want to do in the Awakening Wood for now. There is more to do since we have blue Pikmin, but I like to get yellow Pikmin beforehand. Before fully ending the day, I used the same trick I did with the purple Pikmin to get back up to the maximum amount of white Pikmin, and tragically there wasn't enough time to collect the Doodlebug's goods. Up next is exploring the newest area, the Perplexing Pool.
Bitch!
I told you they'd sour eventually. Look at this Piclopedia, it's already practically filled to the brim and we've only been here for 4 days. Most of the missing entries are plants or just enemies I didn't kill but we've already seen. Landing in the perplexing pool, we have our onions pushed away from us for zero reason again, and there's also a mysterious cave laying around here. This is an unused test cave from Pikmin 2, and I choose not to touch this. We'd usually be pretty restricted on what we can do here, but blue Pikmin allow us to do essentially whatever, including skipping a pretty big chunk of the map to reach yellow Pikmin easier. Speaking of yellow Pikmin, our goal for today is to both unlock and cultivate a large number of both them and blue Pikmin. This is made rather easy due to there being a ranging Bloister in this pool of water, instead of the usual toady Bloister. The ranging Bloister targets your active captain, and if you know how to fight him, he's fairly easy. He gives us the aquatic mine, and most importantly, the seed he drops gives us 50 Pikmin when brought to an onion, along with him also blessing us with tree 20 pellets. That means we can get a total of 120 Pikmin from this guy alone, making him a prime target if we want to grow up our numbers. Since any enemy that carries a treasure on the overworld is set to respawn every time the map reloads, likely to prevent any accidental softlocks, that means this guy is here to stay. I bring some of my blue Pikmin over to this wall to break it down, and in the meantime go over to the yellow onion. I'd argue this section here was actually harder in the vanilla game, as there was a fiery Bulblax right next to a poison Gase. Here though, there's just a decorated cannon larva behind the Gase, and while he is a tough enemy, him being all on his own doesn't make him a very substantial threat. We get yellow Pikmin who are immune to electricity, which we haven't seen that much of yet, but it is pretty notorious in Pikmin 2 for being insta-kill, so these guys will come in handy. They also have the more niche trace of being thrown higher, mostly used for puzzles, but also assist with enemies like the beady longlegs. The blue Pikmin break this wall, which allows us to head over here. Yes, that is the submerged castle, and yes, it is time. To reload the map, I'm not doing the cave, yes. I killed a ranging Bloister again so that we can grow more yellow Pikmin, and the day eventually comes to an end, with us being able to double our total Pikmin count. From what I've observed of the perplexing pool, it does definitely seem to have the easiest overworld layouts. Unless maybe the Wistful Wild turns out to be super easy, but I sincerely doubt the home of the Doomsday apparatus is going to be a very cozy place. Heading back to the perplexing pool for day 6, my sights are set on the caves, but I crack open a ranging Bloister for good luck. An ancient Icelandic tradition. The first cave of the area, the Citadel of Spiders, is usually really easy to reach, originally just laying out in the open. However now, you have to do a scale puzzle in order to reach this. This is actually a lot more interesting than the original layout of the map and how it used the scales, though I can cut it a bit of slack since it's the very first time you see them. But the way they're used here is very nice. They serve as both the way up to the cave and the way up to the yellow onion, if you don't cheese. The captain is also no longer completely weightless. I don't know why it wasn't like that in the original game, but whatever. Now that we're up there, there's nowhere else to go but down. The cave starts off annoying already, as first of all, I make a complete ass of myself trying to fight the world's smallest hermit crawmad, and second of all, the floor is littered with enemies and I have no clue where the treasure is. It's floors like these where I really wish I had the treasure gauge. I at least have somewhat of an idea where it may be though. The Empress Bulblax we fought dropped the Rush Boots, an upgrade you usually get from the Empress Bulblax in the Frontier Cavern. That might be a clue telling us that the treasure gauge is located there. The only reason I didn't book it straight to the Frontier Cavern is because it's a late game cave, so I'd like to at least wrap up the easy caves before heading into a late game cave that's likely to be a guerrilla advertising campaign for alcohol. There's also always a chance that the treasure gauge isn't even there and the clue was just there to mess with us. The enemies on this floor aren't really too bad, though it is the first time we see an enemy drop from the ceiling. I'm grateful that shit is starting up so soon. What is bad are the duplicate treasures, which make us scout out the entire floor. This tomato was the only treasure we needed here, but with these duplicate treasures there's always a mind game being played on whether that is the only treasure here, and that mind game is heavily stacked against you. Sure, that could be the only treasure, but if I leave without the floor being clear, there very well could have been another distinct treasure I missed, meaning we'd have to go back to the cave to get us. I'd personally rather check for them every single time than risk that happening, but we'll pretty soon see how that's wishful thinking. Despite all of that though, floor 1 is fairly chill, hoping sublevel 2 is the same. That's a nice introduction to the floor. If you couldn't tell, the volatile dweevils move comically fast now, turning them from a manageable threat into something that warrants a channel rebrand. They wiped my yellow Pikmin into near extinction as I didn't flower them up with all of the nectar we don't have. I figured they might be important for this cave, so I just left and got some more from the onion before re-entering it. We get a nice welcome back with a worse layout for the first floor that kills several of my purple Pikmin. On the bright side, we at least know what the treasure is for this floor. To deal with the volatile dweevils, I just drag along a singular red Pikmin to bait them down, which allows me to also scope out the floor. This one's also enemy litter, but worse as we have to deal with stuff such as Wally Hops. Anyways, we find a treasure inside one of the Wally Hops, Grace. Then I know where the other one is as I saw it earlier, plus it isn't even that hard to nab. Fantastic! After that, there's still one more treasure. Okay, I'll kill off this fiery bullblack, so he'd obviously have the treasure. No. Let's check some of the other enemies. No. The dastardly mod subverted my expectations by putting the treasure in these swooping snitch bugs, who I thought were unimportant. What a good twist. Oh, no. Well, I already copped onto what's happening. The treasure must be buried, probably over here. Or maybe in here. Or, no, it's gotta be here. Saying I scrutinized this floor for the last treasure would be an understatement. I went through every nook and cranny here, even ended up collecting every single corpse, and it was nowhere. This treasure is an apparition. It must exist and is spawned in because the Pikmin are humming the tree-note song, but there must have been some freak glitch as it is nowhere. This requires a reset after already beating the floor fully. Well, that's 22 minutes of my life I'm not getting back. Our next attempt was basically the same. In fact, it was the same, and I had to deal with the exact same bullshit again. The Pikmin say there's a treasure left, but it's nowhere to be found. The only difference is there was an additional bottle cap this time. I just decided to leave because we had already cleared the floor twice now. Something I've noticed as I've been playing is that the treasures inside of a cave stray exactly the same as the cave it's based off of. For instance, all the treasures we got in the Emergence Cave were also in the original Emergence Cave. They even remain in basically the same order of collection. So if we continue along this cave and don't run into the bubber ducky, we're fucked. Sublevel 3 is another maze. An enemy we see a lot of here is the careening Dirigibug, who produces and drops bomb rocks, but we can easily stunlock them using a purple Pikmin. Stay put for a second. Yellow Pikmin can easily take care of the beady longlegs as they're actually able to reach him for the majority of the fights. In fact, they get thrown even higher than the vanilla game, so it's hard to miss him, except for when you do and a Pikmin gets tossed all the way over to a lake. Even when juggling both a careening Dirigibug and a beady longlegs at the same time, this isn't the worst. Plus we get a bubber ducky, meaning we likely didn't miss any treasures on the last floor. Hopefully. Were we not there already? Despite the motions he was pulling the first time we saw him when I needed him to move away from the Dirigibugs to fight him, he's very keen on staying still, even when they are actively blowing him up. Help yourself, I guess. I'll just go over and deal with this bread bug while you do whatever— oh well, now he wants to move. He's just a complete contrarian to what you want him to do. Need him to move, he'll stay perfectly still. Want him to go away, he'll hound you down all the way to your base. Also, cheers to the rocks that can spill Pikmin over them from only one way, leaving them stuck. We were there. It's not even a question this time. Where are you coming from? Just leave me alone. He had nothing, and a lot of the treasure here is just the same duck. I guess we can collect the duplicates to see if... oh. There's a lot of them, and also enemies that are in water are in the background. Neither of them we can reach. After a while of trekking through this, I just gave up and took the gamble of leaving. It's either that's the only treasure we have to guess, or there's another one, and even if there is, I'd rather do this floor with blue Pikmin. Oh, fuck you. This cave has just been non-stop enemy litter. This one's similar to the third floor of the original Citadel of Spiders, except it's the size of Canada. It also has the same treasure as that floor, fittingly titled Patience Tester. So I assumed that the buried treasure would also be here, and I was correct. I was tempted to leave, but I kind of got cold feet and decided to double check. 12 minutes later, I regretted double checking. This floor isn't even hard. In fact, I'd say it's the easiest by far, but it just takes ages. There's at least a Queen Candy Pop Bud, though. This floor has bulborb larvae falling from the sky, which looks really weird, but I do find it preferable to King Vol over here. More enemy litter again, with tons of duplicate treasures. I obviously didn't like enemy litter when I did Kaizo, I mean who would, but throwing duplicate treasures into the mix just makes these floors fucking nasty. There's also a large orange bulborb presence here, an enemy we only saw briefly beforehand. They still have a longer wake-up radius, but are also immune to getting stunned by purple Pikmin, making them pretty dangerous. I didn't bother scrutinizing this floor as it is filled with duplicates, and I just couldn't see any spot where the Bowser matches could even be. Plus, with how many duplicates there are, it probably would have shown its head at this point. Part of that decision was also influenced by the fact that I was just over this cave by now.
Oh, fucking hell.
Heading into sublevel 6, we see it's very similar to the second floor of the Hole of Demons. It actually looks easier than that floor since there's dweevils instead of anode beetles, but there's a reason I said looks instead of is. There's not just a beady, there's also a raging Longlegs who acts the same but moves a lot faster and has far bigger feet. If you have Bitter Spray on hand, this becomes a lot easier, as you can single out one of the bosses to kill. If you don't have Bitter Spray though, then better luck next time. On the bright side, all of these bosses had the remaining treasures of the caves, so all of the gambles I took with the duplicate treasures paid off. Naturally, we can't just collect our goods in peace. The mod has to have a breadbug steal one of them and then promptly drop a segmented crobster to harass us. You aren't even allowed to finish floors in this game. I chose to ignore the segmented crobster while collecting treasures, which sounds a lot riskier than it actually is. He only targets captains, not Pikmin, meaning as long as we keep our captains away from him, he won't bother any of the Pikmin collecting things. This would have allowed us to easily finish the floor, but of course the breadbug just had to dump the treasure behind the crobster. Instead of fighting him, I just led him into the arena and continued to ignore him, finally allowing us to wrap this floor up. Thankfully, the final floor is just filler, and it's really easy to dash to the exit while Armageddon breaks out behind you. I don't know why these weird useless floors exist, but if I had to guess, Pikmin 2 has a mechanic where if you're on the last floor and a treasure drops from a boss, it will actually change its ways if you wouldn't have had enough Pikmin to collect this. Having an additional floor at the end of the cave prevents this from happening. If that's the reason these floors exist, then that is just hysterical levels of being mean to the player. Anyways, we are finally finished with this cave. I don't know if it's because my experience was tainted by all of the shenanigans we had to endure, but that was probably the hardest cave so far and also my least favourite. The enemy litter floors with tons of duplicate treasures were just brutal. Even if some of them are technically easy, they take forever, and I'm really hoping that this isn't the norm from here on out. From start to finish, this cave took an hour and 36 minutes, which is absolute insanity for an early game cave that's only 7 sublevels. For comparison, the longest cave in Pikmin 2, the 15 sublevels long Hole of Heroes, took me 33 minutes to beat from start to finish. That cave was also one big advertisement for the treasure gauge, so I decided to set my sights on heading to the Frontier Cavern. That is of course a late game cave, and I suspect it could be a pretty big jump in difficulty, so we will need at least a bit of preparation. I wrap up the perplexing pool by just collecting some treasures on the overworld. We get a good look at the water dumples too. They move fast and have a lot of health, meaning they can tank a lot of damage. It's to the point where in order to kill them in water, you either need to just swarm them and accept that some Pikmin will die, or fight them slowly with surgical precision. They also have stupid knockback that sends your Pikmin literally everywhere. What a fun enemy. After that's done, I head to the Awakening Wood and use the purple Pikmin trick as they didn't exactly have the best time in the Citadel of Spiders. We of course pay a visit to our good friend the Doodlebug, several times in fact. If a difficulty mod like this exposes any accidental loopholes, I'm obviously hopping right on them. This game of chess isn't entirely one-sided. I was also meant to do a bit of actual progress in the area too, but I got a bit carried away. We harness a total of 10 spicy sprays and 20 bitter sprays. That might sound like overkill, but I've seen these types of mods turn 36 bitter sprays into 2 after a singular cave, so I feel it's reasonable. Anyways, now it's time to face the Frontier Cavern. We land in the Valley of Repose, which we can freely explore now that we have blue Pikmin, and it's not every day you see the tutorial have a worse layout than the regular area. The iconic Gatling Groink is just gone. His sole purpose in life was to just fucking annoy us when we tried to weigh down a paper bag. Even the rest of the area isn't that bad. For example, the burrowing snagret here is replaced with nothing. Where did he go? Thanks for making me waste a spicy spray. There's nobody even around the bridge to mess with us while we build this. Where in the fucking world did you come from? I'd argue this layout is slightly easier than vanilla, and while it's the easiest, this one is probably the fairest overworld layout so far, and in terms of being a normal area in a Pikmin game, and not a Pikmin 2 hack that wants you dead, this is probably the best area. In fact, I like some enemy placements here more than the original game. They're challenging to deal with, but fit the fairly fast pace this area has. I collected most of the treasures, while all of the ones I could see, as the 2 buried ones, appear to have been moved. Now it's time to go to the Hidden Frozen X. What does that even mean? Welp, this is the cave we were looking for, and we can't postpone it any further if we want the treasure gauge. So let's go in. Olimar and Louie delve into a snowy sublevel to start the cave, and I was playing this one in the middle of a heat wave, so this was the first cave where I wish I delved in with them. Not actually a bad start. A lot of the enemies here are weak, and we even get some doodlebugs, which is very generous of the game. I'd say the worst thing about this floor is that other enemies can wake up the bulborbs by bumping into them, and stuff like this can end up happening. I mostly went through the floor with purples, which you'd think wouldn't be able to deal with these poison pipes, but purple Pikmin can deal with anything. Well, I'm never doing that shit again. As I was able to figure out by the floor being covered in poison, and also the fact that there's buried treasures at this point in the original cave, the treasures here are buried. I found the first one quickly enough, but the second one drove me nuts. I was on the cusp of assuming that the glitch on the second floor, the Citadel of Spiders, had happened again, and just giving up to move to the next floor. It hadn't though. It was in a spot of this room that I just about missed when scrutinizing the floor several times. Glad I held out too, as this is a unique treasure. The trend for the Frontier Cavern so far just seems to be doing the original floor, except harder, and the size has been increased to a comical degree. This floor alone has 5 rooms, and these are large rooms. The occasional falling boulders and the not-so-occasional careening dirigibugs do up the challenge, but using a similar strategy as the original floor work the same. And the decorated canopies can help you clean some of the clutter if you need them to. Skitter leaves are here. It's the first time we've seen them, and I'm naturally suspicious since they are a completely harmless enemy. When a difficulty mod randomly throws harmless enemies into a floor, I'm never like, oh, they probably wanted to add to the atmosphere of this floor. No, it's probably because the treasures located in one of 50 of them are stupid shit like that. It surprisingly wasn't though. I doubt they're here for any innocent reasons, however. I think they were put on this floor in an attempt to potentially have them wake up the bulborbs when they skitter around. Oh, so that's why they're called that. Anyways, I collected one of the treasures. I wonder where the other one is. Probably not that way. Whenever you're ready, boss. This floor is far from easy, but so far the Frontier Cavern, our Hidden Frozen X, hasn't been the worst surprisingly. As you can see, there's quite a lot of Bulbmen around. I'm thankful this happened in the cave where I started off by only losing 1 Pikmin, so I basically don't get any Bulbmen. Looks like things are starting to pick up. Oh, they definitely are. Would you get back in the arena, you fucking cheater? How am I meant to look at this masterful display of camping and not believe that the enemies in this game have not achieved some form of sentience? At least to put the 2 bosses that had the treasures of the floor only a hop, jump, and a shit your pants away, so the floor wrapped up rather quickly. I'm not getting any Bulbmin. There's like one. Oh, boo-hoo. Go play the mod and claim that Bulbmin for yourselves if you want to see it so badly. We can thankfully just head straight to the Oh, now we're clogging holes in the cave. Now is when we're gonna start doing this. Alright, fine, I'll go get the Bulbmin while I'm at it. It's beautiful. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. The confused Bulborb has fallen in with the Pikmin. Will you ever give this guy a fucking break? I just dash over to the exit, ensuring that the few yellow Pikmin I brought with me remain unharmed. Sublevel 4 looked at the floor from the original Frontier Cavern that contained loads of anode beetles along with bumbling snitch bugs, and said, how can we make this floor as obnoxious as possible? The answer is to cover the floor in water, add a ton of additional enemies such as Wallyhops, and make you fight the Emperor Bulblacks. 9 times! You have to micromanage all of these separate enemies at once, and it is insanely stressful. Oh, you plonkers. If this was all condensed into one room, despite its difficulty, I think it'd actually be a fun enough challenge. But it isn't. You have to repeat this process 3 times in a row. Spicy Spray is at least able to absolutely tear the Bulblacks to shreds, so they did end up being the easiest part of the floor. But even then, holy shit. I hadn't used Spicy Spray much, at least on purpose, because I hadn't felt that much of a need to, so I only really notice now how much it boosts your Pikmin's attack damage in this mod. Do not sleep on this stuff. We actually ran into the first purple flower we've seen since the second cave. I didn't have too many reds or yellows, so I predominantly drew in blue Pikmin, which I'm sure was a good decision. This floor alone took 22 minutes to clear. It takes me that amount of time to beat the Frontier Cavern in regular Pikmin too. I have the receipts, I'm not lying. Sublevel 5 seems okay at first glance, but if you do a bit of listening, you'll realize there's just a bit of an issue. Yeah, there's an Empress Bulblack shooting out larvae. Somewhere. The first part here is like a horror game. You're just dealing with some weaker enemies with the looming threat of 1,000,000 children coming to hound you down. Then we finally meet the larva, and it's as petrifying as I thought it would be. Our captains don't really have the best health, and while the larvae thankfully don't chomp off a third of our health like most smaller enemies, they still deal some damage that I'd like to avoid. That means trying to stand still with one captain like you can usually do doesn't really work. Not to mention the arena is filled with the enemies that do take 1 full third of our health, so this feels almost impossible to manage. I was mostly just running around dumbfounded for a few minutes. I tried to use this concrete part as cover, similar to what we did in the Emergence Cave, but it was too shallow, they just start spilling over after a bit. Eventually I came up with the strategy of not using any strategy. I just charged right in and hoped for the best. Pikmin obviously died, but it wasn't as much of a cataclysmic disaster as I was imagining. The Empress doesn't even have the treasure, we have to go all the way to this fiery Bulblacks to get it. You usually get the Brute Knuckles upgrade on this floor, which I might add is usually a rest floor, but the mod isn't too keen on those. We instead get the Silencer, which is usually what you get from the segmented Crobster. They brought back the old joke exclusive to the Japanese release of its price being the number of man. This was very quickly changed outside of Japan to contain the new number of man. We had to put up with 2 brutal floors back to back, but we got through them. Sublevel 6 thankfully ends up being a bit of a break. Now, due to the stuff we've had to deal with so far in this cave, a break does not mean a nice rest floor. It means a floor with several decorated cannonballs that take 7 minutes to beat instead of 22. Something I heard about this mod from people who requested it after the Kaizo video is that compared to Kaizo, this mod was more interesting and fair, and from what I've played, I'd have to agree. Now obviously I'm not saying fighting 9 Emperor Bulblacks for 22 minutes is fair difficulty, but Pikmin 2 Kaizo relied on a lot of nonsense spam floors that were repeated over and over again ad nauseum. So far, Lands of Torture has had fully distinct layouts for every floor we've gone through, and there's usually been some method to the mayhem. Despite the game obviously being pretty frustrating, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least a little entertained seeing what the mod would come up with next. Now, while Sublevel 6 was hard but fine enough, the next floor is a whole different story. The floor that Sublevel 6 was based off of included a lot of water, and I thought we had been spared by the mod when there was barely any on that floor aside from a very small segment. But it actually turns out this was far from an act of mercy, as they were merely holding that water off for this floor. This is already bad enough because the sheer prevalence of water dumpers, who with our dwindled blue Pikmin numbers and the overall clutter of this floor feel almost impossible to deal with. But the real stinger here is that because they held off the water for this floor, instead of needing to collect 2 treasures that are usually out in the open, we have to get 1 regular treasure and 1 buried treasure. That means we have to drag white Pikmin around with us everywhere we go in order to search for us, which is easier said than done due to the various vast pools of water. After several minutes of hopelessly pursuing this treasure, I run into a buried cannonball larva who ends up having us. It is just about possible to bring a singular white Pikmin over there to uncover the treasure. However, to my dismay, it needs 25 Pikmin to carry. We only have 20 Pikmin that can actually cross the water, so the floor is impossible. The mod appears to be well aware of this possibility, as this is the first non-final floor to contain an exit geyser. There's nothing I can do now aside from either continuing on or just leaving. I chose to just leave, as we have to come back here anyways. On a more positive note, at least we have some security as we keep everything we've collected so far. When we surface, we get congratulated for fully repaying the debts. Since we've only fully done 4 caves, it's naturally hard for this big credit sequence to actually feel rewarding in the slightest. I was just staring at this wanting to get back to the Frontier Cavern. Louis gets left behind, or maybe he left himself, it's never made clear. Though if I had to go through all of this just for my coworkers to call me a fucking creature, I'd probably leave too. The president joins us to search for both Louis and more treasure. Maybe seeing this stuff firsthand will convince him to give us a raise. Heading back to the Valley of Repose with the president, I'm obviously dead. Oh, you are not the president! How did this random purple Pikmin end up joining us? Anyways, I'm obviously dead set on heading right back to the hidden frozen X to finish it off once and for all. Back on floor 1, I do spend a tiny bit of time on the first floor to whack one of the doodlebugs for some bitter spray. Oh, watch your head. How did you get over there? You were in a dead end. This isn't even meant to be a proper part of the video, but there's just so much going on in this sublevel. Then when it ran out of random stuff to distract us, I get attacked by a burrowing Snagris. In real life. Just some random friendly dove came to my window to watch me write notes for 5 minutes, like I'm a Disney princess. He clearly wanted to come inside too, should have had him playing the mod. I was expecting most of these revisited floors to be really easy, but I don't know. Sublevel 2 somehow went significantly worse than the time where we actually had to clear us. I also realised that if you try to stun-lock the flying enemies with a singular purple Pikmin on this floor, which is what I did for this attempt, the giant breadbug will likely end up killing them by dragging their corpses back with that singular purple, basically punishing you for trying to do that. I put way too much thought into some of this stuff. Also, it looks like my little theory about the skitter leaves was bang on target. They can get crushed by bomb rocks? I had no clue that interaction existed, and I don't even know why it's programmed in, since skitter leaves are never around bomb rocks in the original game. Weird stuff. Anyways, the other floors go a lot more smoothly, and we eventually make it back to sublevel 7. It's definitely easier now that we know what we have to do, but even then, it's quite a loss. Simply just finding the cannonball that we need to kill can be an absolute nightmare, and when have you seen a Pikmin 2 sublevel require precision platforming before? Anyways, we are finally able to collect the treasure, and I can sit back and watch in relief as we... Huh? Why did you go that way? Stop trying to freak me out for no reason. I don't want to do this all over again. I thought it was going to be real this time. This floor is very similar to the last Empress fight we did in the Hole of Demons. The key difference being is that she gets to experience the miracle of childbirth about 10,000 consecutive times. It makes it harder to deal with, but at least we have some health to spare. Some bosses have specific health values for specific caves, and for some reason the mod makes the Empress Bullblacks weirdly weak for this cave. Not sure why, but it means we're done here pretty quick. I've never seen anything more cathartic in my life. We still have to put up with her irate husband who thought that licking the clogged hole was super funny. I guess my more refined brand of humor of killing his wife and children flew over his head since he went straight to our base to complain about us. It was just a joke, stop overreacting. To finally put a wrap on things, we have this really bizarre filler floor. These things are just slowly turning into arse exhibitions. That was definitely the hardest cave by far, and I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that. Ace full sublevels are some of the hardest stuff we've had to put up with so far with 0 breaks. And a floor that essentially requires going through the cave twice unless you are super cautious with your blue Pikmin from start to finish. I do actually like how the treasure gauge is set up and used. I think not giving it to you early in the game but providing you with a clear hint on where it's located is actually clever, and puts getting it into the player's hands rather than it just being in some random sublevel at the tail end of the game. Now that we are finally out of the cave, I chose to collect the final 2 treasures in the overworld here, which will be much easier now with our treasure gauge. So that's where they were. At this point, there's 0 reason to pearl clutch about some snagrets, it's just kind of whatever at this point. The other treasure was moved just a smidge away from where it usually is. No clue why, aside from being slightly annoying. The only thing left here is one other cave, the subterranean complex. But I'm holding off on it for as long as possible, mainly because the original cave gives these types of mods way too much material. Welp, that was the President's first day on the planet. Say what you want about him, but the fact he came all the way to help us must mean he's a pretty upstanding guy. Some president you are. I just got back from vacation to find out you're cheating on me. Well, don't bother coming home until you die and I take every item in this house. Looks like somebody is in for a whole new land of torture when they get back home. I suspect if your domestic life was better, Olimar would be doing all this stuff by himself. We're back at the Awakening Wood, and we might as well complete this area fully, though I doubt that'll be a quick process. I started off with the routine purple Pikmin trick again to get their numbers up. Then the section we have to do to get to our next cave, the Bulblax Kingdom, is another instance of this mod having strangely good level design at random. Instead of just breaking down a wall and unclogging a hole to get full access here, you simply just have to walk past the pool of water which can never be drained. To let other Pikmin get over there, which you'll need to do in order to break down the electric gate, you have to break down a bramble wall on this ledge which is blocked off by an orange Bulborb. You can either fight him with your blue Pikmin, or there is just enough wriggle room to sneak past him so you can bring some more combat-oriented Pikmin to deal with him. This is vastly more interesting than what the vanilla game did with this section, and there's actually quite a lot going on here. After all of that, we're able to access the Bulblax Kingdom and the Healing Cask, which was moved to make room for that obnoxious Groink. After collecting it, we might as well enter the kingdom. Going back to a cave that's meant to be earlier into the game with the treasure gauge feels like I time traveled to a war in the 18th century and brought a tank. Look at this, I can identify which rooms are useless, what direction I should be going in, and can quickly uncover the enemy I need to kill. I know I'm acting like a caveman that discovered fire over an upgrade you usually have for the vast majority of the game in vanilla Pikmin 2, but having it taken away from you for so long really makes you appreciate it when it's back. Sublevel 1 was actually really easy, just consisting of some Bulborbs, nothing our purple Pikmin can't handle. I cleared it in under 3 minutes though, which is a clear indicator of the impact the treasure gauge is having. That clear time for a floor would be utterly unfathomable beforehand. The orange Bulborb isn't really the most pleasant to deal with, especially here on floor 2 when he's surrounded by a bunch of dwarves. Being immune to purple Pikmin's stuns obviously isn't helping, though they do still suffer from the smaller stun that enemies face from a purple slam, so you can definitely lag them out with that if you are swift enough with your throws. This being the Bulblax Kingdom, and the fact that the game has been using the Emperor Bulblax quite liberally, enough so that he revoked his role to a constitutional monarchy, it's going to be pretty obvious what boss we'll be facing here. Yep, it's burrowing Snagret time. Heading into sublevel 3, I'm definitely not regretting going out of my way to get the treasure gauge anytime soon. Giant maze with tons of dead ends and the treasure is buried. No thank you. It's the first time we've seen the female Sheargub in a while, and they're super annoying, literally pushing your Pikmin into other enemies. Also, quite a lot of Bulbmen. Don't bother splitting up from your squad for a second, or else you'll suddenly start getting jumped by one who hiked from halfway across the sublevel. I was about to say that the cave had been weirdly easy. Yeah, that definitely didn't scare the shit out of me. Most of this floor is spent engaging in this Tom and Jerry chase with a fiery Bulblax and a bunch of dwarf Bulbears who decided to chime in. After I finished that chase, we immediately had to do another one, as this big lump of lard woke another one up. It got so bad I had to take a break to clear up this large pack of Bulbears, who would have devoured all my Pikmin and asked for desserts. At least the gambling worked this time. Handy, because despite how big the Emperors are in this cave, their health pools weren't really scaled up at all, so Spicy Spray still tears them to shreds. They're also so big the process of turning them to stone actually lags the game slightly. I was worried from the background we'd have to do the Mel Maze again, but this time with tons of fiery Bulblaxes, but no, it's just another arena, which I guess is a preferable outcome. I chose to just ignore the fiery Bulblaxes this time, which was probably what I should have done the first time. Overall, that was just rough. The start of Sublevel 5 is just one of those ones where you simply have to let the footage do all of the talking for you. After that absolutely abhorrent start, it turns out the rest of the floor isn't the worst. There are a lot of traps, but you don't need Pikmin to activate them. And since there's those rolling boulders you can't gauge the direction of, you'd probably be strolling around without Pikmin, or just one of them anyways. You don't have much choice. Then you just deal with some dwarf Bulborbs and maybe some Cannonballs to reach the treasure. I didn't safeguard the Pikmin as it was being collected, which was a mistake, as a dwarf followed them home. I was so eager to save my Pikmin from a threat they could easily kill themselves, I ended up bringing over something far more dangerous in the process. This floor also brings back the beloved duplicate treasures, but thankfully with the treasure gauge, it's far easier to identify when a floor is solely just duplicates, so they weren't really an issue. Yeah, we get the gist at this point. It's... oh, what the... Sublevel 6 is the Empress Bulblax arena, except the way up is filled with my most favourite enemy in the whole wide world. That little stunt the female Sheargub tried to pull gave me an idea, and lo and behold, it worked pretty well, and got us one of the treasures of this floor way before we were supposed to. The other one is inside an Emperor Bulblax, who ever since we've discovered the power of Spicy Spray in this mod, hasn't really been a cause of concern for a while. I used to dread seeing them at the start of the mod, but now it's kind of nice. I prefer having them over like a Snagrus. I guess our power levels are growing or something. That's hardly it, is this? I figured. This is actually quite an underwhelming finale. We already know this guy is easy with Spicy Spray, but these 4 other Bulborbs weren't really much of an issue. And despite the puzzle being fully intact, the treasure just spawned over here, so we could just ignore us. Why is the entire screen shaking? What's going on with your leg? Where are you guys going? We finally have immunity to fire, because that was our biggest concern. Or well, I assume that floor was the finale and that this one was the mere filler one right at the end. But no, it isn't. There's more. I guess I didn't notice, not like there's a really obvious cue that denotes when a floor is the last one. That's one reason not to play Lands of Torture at 1 AM. Getting your Pikmin over to the clogged hole is obviously really obnoxious. All of these dead ends that look like safe spots for our Pikmin are filled with hermit Chromads who peck away at our Pikmin, while we try to figure out where we should even go. Eventually I just bring a few Pikmin and pretend that there aren't 3 giant Emperor Bulblaxes behind me. If I stay up any later playing this fucking mod, I'll be doing that during sleep paralysis too. The actual final floor would have been a complete and utter nightmare. If the game ever takes an abnormally long time to load a sublevel, you already know it's over. There's a lot of gates blocking off the floor, including the unlikely pair of a wall and a hermit Chromad who wouldn't let Olimar through, blocking us from the exits. However, a careening Dirigibug blew him up with 1 bomb rock and gave Olimar a completely free route to the geyser. What a polite young man, you must be one of the ones from Pikmin Squared. This might have been the easiest cave so far, likely in large part to the treasure gauge. I know I've been deep-throating its mirror slug this whole time, but it cannot be understated how helpful it is. Not much time left in the day, but there's always time for a doodlebug. Well, that gives us a shortcut. The game has had an awful amount of restraint to only use the pileated Snagret now. Engaging in this epic duel accomplished absolutely nothing because the game just broke. The onion stopped working, it cut me off at 90 Pikmin? I don't know what is happening or how because this is not a known glitch or anything. I just decide to reset to try and get the game to function like it should. It's happening again? What is going on? Maybe there's too many objects loaded in or something, but it kinda throws a spanner in the works of my plan to visit the Snagret hole if I'm gonna be 10 Pikmin short. I just decided to collect some overworld treasures such as the scale puzzle one, which can be cheesed with this bumbling snitch bug. These guys can be annoying though if you're using them for stuff like this. First of all, they never fucking follow you for zero reason, and second of all, half the time, no matter how much you Mario Party the joystick, your dipshit captain won't get off when you need him to. Sometimes he just leaves instantly though, which makes it pretty free. Then the other treasure is behind the Snagret Hole Gase, which we get fairly naturally, and the other is near the Blue Onion, with 3 water dumples, which are just grace.
Here's the problem.
So that explains why we could only have 90 Pikmin out. Didn't really consider Bullman being spawned in as a possibility, as that would be nice, and that's the one thing this mod isn't. At least we crack that case and can finish the area off tomorrow, hopefully. Before we head into the Snagret Hole, we obviously have to go retrieve the Bulbman, which is fairly easy despite it being a bit of a hike. I didn't really talk about the Bulbman when we first got them because we only had one, but they're just a type of Pikmin that you stumble upon in caves that are immune to all 4 of the core hazards, which obviously makes them very useful. Then we can warp up here with our bumbling friend and just head into the cave from there. Unless we want to fight the pileated Snagret again, and believe it or not, I don't. The Snagret Hole is the hardest cave in the Awakening Woods, and in the vanilla game has quite a lot of Snagrets, so I'm not really looking forward to this one. Delving in, the Bulbman do thankfully join us. I was fully expecting them to just dip and leave us with 90 Pikmin. We start off with a Snagret surrounded by Shearwigs who are all blocking off a fiery Bulblax. Good intro. We had a Snagret as the first boss of the Bulblax Kingdom, and now we have an Emperor Bulblax in the birdhouse for the Snagret Hole. Everything's just fucked up in the Awakening Wood this week. I've also officially hit Husk status. This is the part of a very difficult Pikmin mod when you've seen so much nonsense throughout playing that it eventually stops phasing you. If there's so many Snagrets in this garden, then how are all of these little insects in such high numbers? And if there's all these little insects in this garden, then how are the strawberries in such high numbers? Also, I only noticed while editing, but the changes from day to night are actually kept up inside of this cave, which is some nice attention to detail. After a while of looking at this, I decided no, and just brought a lot of white Pikmin to the nearest strawberry so that I could ignore everything, which worked relatively well. We do of course have to crawl all the way over to the exit with our Pikmin however, so we can't get off completely scot-free. Please, just please, can we stop? Get away from the exit. Sub-level 3. Never have I ever wanted to stop playing a game more. Snagret spam starts right at the base, there's countless bread bugs that steal all of the treasures, tons of duplicate treasures, poison everywhere so it's hard to navigate, and dwarf bullbears that also make it hard to navigate, along with making fighting the Snagrets even more obnoxious. Just a complete concoction of misery. Something about Snagret spam specifically is just extremely aggravating, more so than any other type of enemy or boss spam. I think it's just the fact that you can't see where they are until you stumble upon one, so when you do find one it's just like, oh great. And then they also just screech so much. I don't mind their noises in the original game where the Snagrets are being used in moderation, but for mods that spam them you just have to hear this shit constantly, it does my head in. I haven't even talked about the pileated Snagret that much, but basically just imagine a regular Snagret with a lot more health that can also move and jump around. Just one of those inventions that quickly get outlawed by the Geneva Convention. There's 2 of them here, and I fought both. The first one had the treasure, and the other one didn't. That wrapped up the floor, and while there were still duplicate treasures everywhere, I just assumed we were finished and was confident in that assumption. Sublevel 4 is probably the easiest floor in this cave so far, with it having the same set of enemies as the original sublevel it's based off of, and it's also pretty small in scale too, with no snagrets around. There is water here, but I was already well equipped for it. Now the enemy layout is fine, but the actual layouts? What is even going on? There's so many clashing assets and rooms, not to mention the random holes in the ground. This floor is disorienting to the point I was struggling to navigate it properly. How does this even get generated? How was Grok, the author of all Pikmin 2 caves, configured for this? We're at the point in the game where we don't even get to breathe anymore or process the sublevel we just entered. Just delve in and right away, buttons, buttons, push buttons, buttons, move the joystick! We have to fight 2 pileated snagrets across 2 arenas filled with water, as large swaths of water dumples surround every single crevice outside of the arena, along with additional burrowing snagrets who also surround the place, poison pipes and electric wires that make it hard to navigate, and dwarf bullbears in dead ends who can interrupt fights. Simply listing the layout of this floor conveys the playing experience, and any additional comments would be completely redundant. You've seen how the water dumples treat blue Pikmin, so just use purples to deal with them. After quite a lot of time, I'm able to deal with both of the pileated snagrets. So far, this cave has been utterly miserable. I was worried about sublevel 6 because there were a lot of snagrets there in the original, so I was expecting something horrible like sublevel 3, but no, we get something not quite what I was expecting, but not much better either. It's the original floor, but 20 times worse. You have to bring Pikmin through this long water-filled interior, however this time there's more everything. We also see the antennabile for the first time, 3 of them, and while they are mostly harmless, they do mess up our treasure gauge, so I don't have a very clear idea on where to go. That's the stuff we have to deal with on this floor. Can't complain that much though, since I used a bitter spray on one of the snagrets and got a spray drop that was descended from the heavens. That cheered me up a little bit at least. In the original floor there's a dwarf orange bulborb that falls from the sky, a nice little reference to the previous floor where there's a lot of them dropping down. And he gives you a treasure. Here you get absolutely bombarded by them everywhere you step, and you'd assume you'd have to go and find the one with the treasure, but no! That treasure's not on this floor and you'll be on a wild goose chase looking for us. Made worse by the small clover being cloned in every dead end, at times locked behind gates with unreasonably high health. These interfere with your gauge while searching for the treasure and don't allow you to immediately know it doesn't exist, so you have to get all of them to fully figure it out. At least we get some additional white Pikmin for the first time since we initially saw them, though the speed Pikmin isn't very thematically appropriate for the floor that took 18 minutes to clear, not even including the time spent getting the white Pikmin. Final floor, what are we in for? Yeah, this is as stupid as it looks. You have to fight a pileated snagret to get one of the treasures of the floor, which is probably the easiest part as he's not too hard to section off from the rest of the sublevel. He gives us the Justice Alloy, an upgrade that lets your captain endure more damage. Aside from the treasure gauge, this is probably the most useful upgrade for this mod. We now don't really have to be too concerned with our captain's health, and it also completely neuters the damage output of these smaller enemies, turning them into much more menial threats. Hopefully this thing will be able to reduce the mental damage I'll be experiencing from the rest of this floor. This would have been hard enough if we just had to get the treasure from the pileated snagrets, but no. The treasure I was searching every nook and cranny for in the last floor was bumped up to here, and put inside one of the 500 burrowing snagrets. I think what you're meant to do is break down all of these gates and kill the antennabiles so you can access the treasure gauge and get a notion of where the treasure is. But there's so many snagrets that they actually begin to block off access to the antennabiles. I eventually decided to just tuck in and kill every single one of them until I found the treasure. There's not really much strategy to this, especially when there's 3 of them at once. Just use Spicy Spray to power up your Pikmin and use Bitter Spray to stall off some snagrets so you can kill others. Repeat ad nauseum. Fucking finally. If you're watching this video and thought I was going overboard with hoarding up sprays, I definitely wasn't. 67 Pikmin died in this cave. A large bulk of those were from that floor alone. I don't know if this was the hardest cave so far, but it is at least a contender, and was definitely the most miserable. Well, we can leave the Awakening Wood after we just collect one more treasure. We might have a bit more to do, actually. I saw that coming and threw a purple to counteract it and kill them all, but then this sack of spuds floats in the air like a fairy instead of doing his fucking job. I hope he's the one who got his head bitten off. I'm trying to cultivate their kind from the brink of extinction, and this is how they repay me. At the very least, we always get some extra sprays from these purple grinds. Now that our purple Pikmin numbers are back up, we can go get the shuttlecock. The shuttle's not the only cock around, it seems. I grabbed this treasure by not engaging in the puzzle at all, and we have finally finished our first area, which means we are approaching the goal quicker and quicker. Well, as sad as it makes me, I'll never see the Awakening Wood again, unless I turn my head 50 degrees down. Back to the perplexing pool. The only pool more perplexing is the gene pool for most of these creatures. At least the overworld here feels chill after all the shenanigans in the Awakening Wood. I decide to head straight to the Glutton's Kitchen, as it's what I originally planned to do straight after the Citadel of Spiders, before that cave reminded me what a migraine is. While this electric fence is being broken down, I decide to pick up a treasure that I just left laying around the last time I was here. Bottle opener. Don't tempt me. Right before the cave, we get a doodlebug. I have a feeling things are gonna be alright. Can't even turn my head for 1 second in this mod. Anyways, onto the breadbug invasion. Whoa, it's the giant breadbug maze. We've got to deal with a lot of dwarf bulborbs while searching for a giant breadbug who has the treasure. Not a tall task when he spends all his time in the same spot with all the subtlety of an outdoor firework that was lit off in a kitchen. Pretty easy and brief floor overall. Not even allowed to look away for a moment just to check that I am recording. The floor is a large train maze this time with a good amount of enemies. It was very big, but the breadbugs just kinda kept coming to me, so I was able to get them all out of the picture very quickly. The first treasure was inside one of them, which I claimed before anyone else did, and the second one was completely out of the way of any breadbug's reach. Killing them all also allowed me to very quickly see that the rest of the treasures spawned in were duplicates. The sublevel was pretty easy thanks to that, and also a nice starting room, aside from the very stars. Sublevel 3 is a real goofy sublevel, in a similar vein to Goofy music, which is what is playing right now, the giant breadbug theme. One of the treasures is in this really hyperactive balloon who loves zooming from room to room and shoving random Pikmin into enemies while I'm trying to do other stuff, like clear out the electric hazards that almost turned our entire squad into a public service announcement. Why is the puffy blowhog only showing up now actually? You're a bit late, don't you know we're completely immune to your nasally blasts? Was probably the worst floor so far, but still pretty easy. The breadbugs would want to step up their game a little bit. Are the bullbears like an invasive species with no natural predators? Why has there been so many of their offspring throughout this mod? There's 2 giant breadbugs around along with a copious amount of bull blaxes who I chose to ignore. The giant breadbugs got dealt with fairly quickly, and I was mostly confident that there were only duplicate treasures left. But since it's a small enough floor, there's nothing wrong with double checking. This means dealing with a few Emperor Bullblaxes, but that's nothing new, and at least I've eased my mind and know that there's nothing else we need to... Oh. Well, it's good I checked since the Raging Longlegs does have a treasure. Then of course an Emperor quickly gets woken up and we have to deal with getting berated by him and some dwarves my Pikmin kept completely missing. We can finally then just focus on the Raging Longlegs, who wasn't the worst, and died before he could make it out of bounds to camp there and be an insufferable dickhead for several minutes. Good riddance. The start of the cave has been easy, but it's picked up real quick. Sublevel 5 is miserable. It's absolutely humongous and filled with buried cannon larvae and dwarf bullbears again. I thought this was meant to be the breadbug invasion. It might make sense if this was any other dwarf variant since they are all part of the breadbug family, but the dwarf bullbears are the exception to this. Then again, why am I talking about this as if any of these caves made much sense in the first place? We face off against a man at legs. You know this floor is backwards when he's the easiest part of it. Then we have to comb through the place for a dreadfully long time to find the other treasure, which is inside one of these Emperor Bullblaxes. I decided to not use any spicy spray and fight them the old-fashioned way. I thought it'd be more resourceful. It wasn't. I eventually caved and used a spicy spray and fought them with yellow Pikmin, as they were the most expendable type I had as of now. However, I quickly found out trying to fight these guys with yellow Pikmin is like trying to piss into a plastic straw without making a mess. That whole ordeal cost us a lot of Pikmin, so always remember to use your sprays. Sublevel 6 is where things get truly insufferable. Just a giant maze filled with breadbugs, dwarf bullbears, and anode beetles. At least we get to kill one of the breadbugs quickly. I guess not. Our purples have also just begun to kind of deteriorate, a trend I also notice in Kaizo. Their homing shots just never land half the time anymore. This isn't an intentional design choice, it's just the world starts working against you the deeper you get into these types of mods. Yes, he survived. This floor took 20 minutes to beat, though it felt like at least 40, and if you like the Giant Breadbugs theme song before entering this floor, you won't after leaving. This map just doesn't work with any of these enemies. Well, at least it doesn't work towards your favor in any way. The walls and slopes prevent you from reaching and stopping the breadbugs easily. The dwarf bullbears should be blocked off by these walls, but they just zip up them. Same for the anode beetles, who can fuse currents even when they are both at entirely different elevations. They have cannon beetles in most of the dead ends, but if you have them shoot at the corners, they just kill themselves, acting like he's the one who has to go through this. With this mod's overall design, I can't tell if this is like an accident or an actual strategy they wanted me to use for this floor to deal with them. They're typically bundled with hermit crawmads, which is a really annoying mix. I used a bitter spray to try and combat this, but then the crawmad was just unfazed, even though I directly hit him. Even the game knew that was bullshit, they gave me a refund. To cap things off, before we can get the final few treasures, we have to deal with breadbugs who are doing the hyperdrive nonsense again. They start dodging if you throw Pikmin near them, and I have no clue how because they don't do that normally. They aren't programmed to dodge you while they are carrying stuff. It's only in this weird hyperdrive form that they start doing this. Well anyways, after getting the final treasure of the floor and walking past Spider-Man, we can finally leave. The last floor is the standard filler affair, this time with a cameo appearance from Bulbman. I don't even know how you figure out that you can use the Hermit Crawmad to block off spaces. To avoid it this time, instead of a Dirigibug, I just got clipped out of bounds. Don't even know why, but I'll take it. This cave wasn't the worst, and did have an easy enough start, but the latter half of it is fairly brutal. Both the rest of today and the first half of tomorrow are spent clearing out the overworld in the perplexing pool, which probably ended up being the easiest section of the mod as there's not too much going on. There weren't that many new enemies around, and I'd say the worst threat were the water dumples, but even they weren't giving me much hassle. A few of the treasures were shifted around though. Despite me going over to where the shower room usually is several times, I only noticed now that the shower room wasn't there. Instead there was just a big nuss, at least save that for the shower room. The shower room is moved next to the onion replica, and now it drains the water from there instead of the pool. This changes the puzzle up slightly, along with also moving the magic conch shell, but overall it's mostly the same as the original area. An annoying thing about this section is that you have to throw any non-blue Pikmin over here to get them across safely, which is all fine and well, but this lip here prevents your Pikmin from being able to use it on the way back. So you just have to awkwardly navigate them across this really thin platform. It's not the worst for yellow Pikmin, but for the white Pikmin that jitter and careen everywhere, good luck. You'll want some blues on standby to rescue any Pikmin that fall. After wrapping up the overworld, all we can do now is take on the 2 remaining caves of this area. I'm delaying one of them for as long as I possibly can, so I decided to start with the shower room, now called a Watery Ways. Right off the bat, what should have been a difficult floor with stuff such as orange bulborbs submerged in water and so many different pools that could serve as a summer resource ends up being really easy as the treasure spawns not very far from us. There are loads of bread bugs here which should have stolen the treasure, but none of them wanted it. I saw 3 of them just look at us and then choose to steal a bulborb carcass instead. Guess they have zero desire for a giant lemon squeezer, used as an ashtray or something, I don't know. Oh great, this time it seemed like there weren't any bosses, but after a while... Yep. Actually, it didn't really matter too much. He spawned in a room that he couldn't even leave. That means we can just pretend he isn't there, and most of this floor is spent doing the Emperor Bulblax puzzle. Similar to the one we saw in the Emergence Cave, but this time with dwarf orange bulborbs and no female sheargrubs. Uh-oh, the water wraith has breached containment. No, it's a singular orange dwarf who helped himself to our blue Pikmin. I grabbed the other treasure, which was a duplicate, and the treasure gauge deactivated, which any normal person would probably assume would mean the floor is finished. But just as I was about to head to the exit and start writing notes, I remembered that the water rate works weirdly with the treasure gauge, since in the submerged castle, it's set to only recognize the treasure inside of him on the last floor, not the other ones where you can't kill him. Knowing that, I decided to go back and double check. He's not really hard to deal with since we have purple Pikmin and his hardest phase has been nerfed. I'm aware that him running around like a jackass while being completely defenseless doesn't really look like his hardest phase, but in the context of a floor with several enemies around, it definitely would be quite troublesome. Thankfully in this mod he starts panting after like half a second, meaning he will never get far. Every time I've listened to my Gus, it's been completely correct. Except for that one time it told me not to use a spray, though that may have been my liver talking. I also don't think I have to explain why this is cruel, since you'd very easily assume that the water rates here were useless unless you knew that extremely niche technical detail that you can't even encounter in regular play. Not to mention, the previous water rate we saw didn't have anything, so it's not a huge leap in logic to assume that this one also would have nothing. Niche technical stuff like this does get weaponized throughout the mod, but this is probably the harshest example of it. On sublevel 3, and we can already see it looks great. There's quite an abundance of enemies here. Cannonballs, jelly floats, a fiery bulblax, dwarf bullbears, all a nice mix, but what really adds to the floor are the non-stop water dumples that fall from the sky to really enhance the experience. I first felt a bit bad on this floor because I thought I was using too many bitter sprays. But after like the 6th time I had several water dumples fall on me when I was in the process of fighting other enemies, I just stopped caring. It's essentially mandatory for this floor. I mean, look at the fairest layout the Pikmin scene has ever seen. All the enemies waiting behind a wall and like half of them can interact with the Pikmin through the wall. What am I meant to do? Not a fun floor in the slightest. A rest floor. I thought we'd never see one. Mind you, this is the 9th cave we've played, and this is the first rest floor we've seen in the entire mod. We get access to Bulbmans, several white and purple candy pop buds, along with the funniest treasure in all of Pikmin 2. I'd better give it a test run. I can't believe they got away with that in a Nintendo game. For those of you who don't get the joke, the leaf is a metaphor for penis. Finally though, a relaxing floor. Felt good after all we had to put up with, and also because my Pikmin numbers kinda got a bit ruined in the previous floors. First thing we get after a rest floor is a stress floor. I don't even have much to say because most of the things here spoke for themselves. I used both of my sprays to clear up the man at legs because I had little confidence in his ability to stay in a place where we could duck for cover in a reasonable amount of time. Then I quickly dashed over to an Emperor Bulblax that was nearby to clear him up before the spray ran out, finishing the floor. Sublevel 6 is interesting because if you ignore how obnoxiously long it is, it's probably the closest to a regular Pikmin 2 sublevel. This was like the one floor where it felt like I was playing a version of Pikmin 2 that wasn't entirely far gone from what a normal video game should look like. The enemy layouts are surprisingly tame, they could probably pass in the regular game. In fact, I like stuff such as the jelly floats around several dwarf bulborbs, that's actually a good mix. The only thing really torturous here is the aforementioned length of the floor, as it goes on forever with several duplicate treasures. But that isn't new, and we've seen that exact thing happen with far worse layouts. It's not really the best floor, it is just a worse version of the one it's based on, but it is definitely a lot more tame compared to everything else. Except for the dweevils that fall from the sky, which are scary, to say the least. I don't know what to call these final floors that aren't actually final floors since there's an extra floor tacked on at the end. Well, I do know what to call this specific one, annoying. We have to fight several ranging Bloisters who are surrounded by toady Bloisters. If this was any other boss, this would drive you to drink, but the ranging Bloister allows you to move from basically wherever due to him directly targeting a captain. Plus he can be stalled indefinitely by switching captains continuously. You actually already do something like this in the vanilla game for his refight, which I'd argue is far harder than this floor is. Interestingly, both Bloisters share a lot of the same files, to the point where they start acting weirdly when around each other. Nothing severe, but their buds will randomly swap colors, even when they're dead. There's also the Walpoles who move around really fast and juggle around the enemies. How do you even figure out you can use them for this? Floor takes forever, but it is mostly fine. Aside from when a jelly float showed up, then it wasn't fine. The filler floor this time is a room filled with toady Bloisters that takes about 10 seconds to leave. I like collecting the enemy corpses at times just to see how absurdly high the Poco count for them gets. The watery ways initially seemed like it would be one of the hardest caves, but thanks to a rest floor and the difficulty falling off towards the end, this one was relatively alright. It was basically the inverse of the breadbug invasion. There's only one thing left to do here, and I'm sure you're all very aware of what it is. It's time for the submerged castle. I fight the ranging Bloister outside to get our blue Pikmin numbers up further, and then pay a visit to our doodlebug friend. I brought 100 blue Pikmin with me in case any died on the way there, which was good planning, but none did. You usually don't want exactly 100 blue Pikmin in this cave, as Bulbmen typically spawn here, so I threw away a few, stopping at 77, since it's lucky. That's all the beating around the bush I can do, so let's finally enter. The very first floor of the submerged castle is a harsh reminder for what we were in for. The original submerged castle could have really labyrinth-like sublevels that were pretty hard to navigate, filled with lots of dangerous enemies. This first floor takes that labyrinth aspect to a whole nother level. It is huge, with tons of winding paths. Obviously we are accustomed to maze-like sublevels at this point, but what makes the submerged castle different, both here and in the original game, is the water wraith. We've seen glimpses of him in this mod, but this is where he will really be a tress, as we don't have purples to make him vulnerable up until the very last floor. After a set amount of time, he will drop from the ceiling and terrorize the sublevel, steamrolling absolutely anything in his way, including our Pikmin. The time limit for him is usually 5 minutes, but it seemingly has been increased for this cave to accommodate the much bigger floors. I also said we don't have purple Pikmin, as since this cave is located directly inside of water, you can only bring blue Pikmin into it. In fact, it is hard-coded to only allow you to have blue Pikmin inside of it. We've been using purple Pikmin a lot for combat, since to say they are really good at it would be an understatement. So suddenly having the rug pulled from underneath us for this cave is certainly hard to adjust to. We do get Bulbmen here as said earlier, which are needed for dealing with the hazards the cave will likely be throwing at us. So at least we have that, but man, this floor is rough. Every aspect of it is designed to waste your time. There's the layout itself, breadbugs that can easily steal a lot of the treasures, snow bulborbs that block basically any carrying roost that could possibly exist here, along with a bulbear. A bulbear being here is already bad since it's a very tough enemy, but remember, they come back to life and also weigh 80 Pikmin now. You're going to have to use a bitter spray against them if you don't want to seriously run the risk of the water rate showing up. All of this culminates into a really exhilarating experience. You never truly feel safe until you're right at the exit. We are able to get through this first floor without seeing the water rate, but I don't know how long that will last. Sublevel 2 isn't the best, but isn't too bad, as it follows the same layout as the original floor, which is basically always the same. This meant I already had a partial idea of what to do, plus unlike the last floor, the layout here isn't outrageously long, which also puts us at an advantage. They did have some ways of spicing it up though. There are a lot more dwarf bulborbs around and some poison pipes, making sections like this a lot more time consuming. This does backfire in some ways. The dweevils on the pipe will go straight for the corpses now, cutting out what is usually the most tedious part of the original sublevel, as you can completely ignore them while collecting the treasures. There's also an Emperor Bullblax thrown in there for good measure. The Bullmen are still here, but I think she got lost in the pipe or something, since the little Louis were just standing there waiting for her, but she just wasn't there. This is a rather short floor, which is nice, but I'm hoping that doesn't also mean that the Water Wraith has a shorter spawn time. Since the floor isn't as big as the last one, the timer is back to the standard 5 minutes, which is definitely harsh due to the new stuff added. The water rate was troublesome, but not the worst. I had to quickly get Olimar to dash to base to retrieve some Pikmin and bring them to a safe zone. Then we just had to get the Donos, which is on a long section of land, so it's easy to both see the Wraith coming and to avoid him. It's always a good idea to have a captain right by the exit, as I can just immediately leave as soon as this treasure is collected. Alright, so we go from the water raid having a longer spawn time to accommodate a harder floor, to him having the usual spawn timer, kinda harsh but whatever, then it goes to him spawning in the first fucking 20 seconds. Despite that, this one isn't the worst. It's so big with really large and open sections to the point where the Wraith actually has trouble navigating us. It's pretty likely for him to stay out of your hair for the vast majority of this floor. Plus, even if he did show up, it wouldn't be the hardest to avoid him, so it's not quite as bullshit as that intro would have you believe. Getting the treasure is difficult though, thanks to the toady Bloisters and their impeccable reaction times. The worst enemies here are probably the dwarf bullbears that fall from the sky constantly, but even that isn't too obscene, and the anode beetles are in short enough supply to mostly be ignored too. I thought this one would be hands down the hardest floor, but it ended up probably being the easiest one so far. Sublevel 4 is the one I was looking forward to the least, as it was absolutely filled with explosives in the original game, and that also rings true for this rendition. You have to put up with quite a lot of volatile dweevils who move extremely quickly if you recall, and are really difficult to avoid. You need to do some meticulous planning and playing here, splitting up your captains, moving the bulk of your Pikmin to safe rooms while checking sections with your fastest Pikmin. All of this precise and elaborate play must be done on a floor that gives you 3 minutes until the water raid shows up. If you ever wondered why there's never that many standard enemies in the bomb rock oriented sublevels in the original Pikmin 2, this floor provides the answer. Trying to use your C-stick to avoid the bombs is very annoying when corpses keep getting in the way, leaving your Pikmin to die. I was already going to use a bitter spray, you didn't have to sell it to me. The worst thing here is the utterly baffling design of this sublevel that is near impossible to navigate, enhanced by the dim lighting that makes it super hard to see, and some of the most bizarre gate placements where it's hard to comprehend if they're even going to bring you anywhere after they're broken down. I eventually find the last treasure and sourly overestimate how fast my Pikmin will be able to carry us. That floor was definitely the most difficult one by far. Shame on me for expecting this floor to be free, I guess. This is the sublevel where we finally get access to purple Pikmin to kill the water wraiths. 40 purple Pikmin to be exact. It's kind of easy, but the sheer quantity of water wraiths and dense level layout means it's easy for some Pikmin to get flattened. Then there's the process of actually killing all tree wraiths, which takes forever and is pretty tedious. We at least get the Pluckophone, which allows us to instantly uproot Pikmin sprouts. Then there's the filler floor at the very end, which in my head I was imagining as a huge maze with like 50 water wraiths, but no. There's no wraiths, not even any bosses, just some out-of-the-way water dumples and some free white Pikmin. That's unexpectedly nice. That wraps up the submerged castle, which was brutally difficult, but I also found it to be the most fun cave out of them all so far. Just the addition and looming presence of the water raid adds a lot of pressure and stress to these floors, which I found myself oddly enjoying. That fully wraps up the perplexing pool, and the only thing left to do aside from the very last area in the game is the subterranean complex. I held off on this cave for a long while because its enemy roster in the vanilla game is a modder's wet dream to make the most agonizing floors humanly possible. You go from a jolly winter wonderland to a metal hell where half the enemies carry fucking artillery. Since we cleared everything else in the Valley of Repose, all we have to do is walk to the cave. I didn't bring any blue Pikmin since the subterranean complex typically doesn't have water, and to the mod's credit, it hasn't been telling any major fibs with the hazard disclaimers. Hopefully there's no unexpected obstacles that would require me to walk all the way back to get blues. Great. Go purple Pikmin! No skipping that one, it seems. Gotta haul my ass all the way back to get blue Pikmin after I spent time crafting the perfect squad layouts, just to deal with this cloaking burrow shiz. Then I have to watch a bridge slowly be built and then walk all the way back to the Onion to remake my squad. After all of that, we can finally do our peaceful stroll to the subterranean complex. The first floor is simple. Well, it really isn't, but after all that we've seen, a floor with a bunch of Bulborbs and 2 Emperor Bulboxes isn't really noteworthy. Surprisingly, the worst enemies here were the snow Bulborbs. They were being insufferable. I could just not hit them for whatever reason, and it was driving me up a wall. Not helped by the fact that you have to use white Pikmin for most of them too, a type I didn't really want to lose. Exhausted Super Stick. Me too, Super Stick, me too. Easy floor, but it did have me molding right off the bat. Oh, just the exact mental image of what I didn't want to see when I entered this cave. I took a risk by just chucking all my white Pikmin onto this treasure, and it ended up working. They could speed past basically all of the threats, so I decided to use them for most of the floor. The groinks are actually the stationary ones that you usually see on towers and such, so they won't be moving. Especially this one because the Dirigibugs just killed him for no reason. I didn't even tell them to do that. Oh man, this floor is just the gift that keeps on giving. The gift that keeps on giving. At least you can have most of the other enemies just kill each other. It sorts out a lot of the orange Bulborbs in our way quite nicely. Sure. This floor was surprisingly easy actually, though some of that may have been down to luck. I wonder what could possibly fall from the sky, if anything at all. I'm at least happy that's out of the way immediately, but the rest of the floor isn't much better. There's a section with an Antennabile and a ton of dwarf Bulbears, which already didn't look fun, but then they throw a Cannonbile you can't see beforehand into the mix, and I swear my guardian angel must have been working as hard as Olimar to get me out of this mostly unscathed. I had a boulder aimed right at my general direction that just about hit something and broke. I tried to stop it with bitter spray. What's that gonna do, idiot? It's already stone. That's fair. The final treasure is in a careening Dirigibug, which is actually really nice because it can blow up all of its surroundings, making it easy to isolate and kill. The careening Dirigibug has been surprisingly polite during this mod. It's always fulfilling its random act of kindness whenever we play any mod really. I don't get why, but thank you. Another rest floor? It's a Christmas miracle. Okay, that's just cheating. There's a lot of Queen Candy Pop buds, so we're able to get our numbers back up to 100 Pikmin, which is nice, though we actually didn't lose too many of them, surprisingly. Sublevel 5 is the same as the original sublevel, except it's massive, and there's Dwarf Bulbears, just kind of the mod's go-to at this point if they need extra enemies. Also Skitterleaves, who are likely here to clog up the C-stick when you're trying to avoid the volatile Dweevils. The same strategy of just using white Pikmin to outrun the explosives works just as well. Even when they ditch the designated safe path you made for them and run off so fast you can't even stop them, things still turn out completely fine. For how long I held off on this and for how much of a nightmare I thought this cave would be, it's been weirdly easy, and that's not even a bait and switch for the next floor. Sublevel 6 continues that trend. Sublevel 6 is the same as the original sublevel, except it's massive, which makes it more tedious to find the treasures, but also makes the floor way less difficult compared to its vanilla counterparts. This was one of the hardest floors in the original Pikmin 2 because you'd have to face a lot of enemies in a very condensed arena that was surrounded by poison pipes. All of that is sectioned off here, which makes it really easy to deal with, and the only new additions are some dwarf orange bulborbs that fall from the sky. That's kind of whatever at this point, and we've seen that exact concept used in worse ways before. This one kind of ends up being a joke compared to the floor it's based off of. Sublevel 7 is the same as the original sublevel, except you get the drill by now. A lot of these enemy layouts look fairly nasty, but either they're in rooms that are useless, or suffer the issue of there being so many hazardous enemies that they kind of just end up all killing each other, causing it to wrap around into it being really easy to deal with. This is probably the hardest floor still, since you do have to put up with a good few groinks and random bulborb larvae that fall from the sky. But the most deadly thing here was the Dwarf Bulbear's shake range that I didn't even know was that bad until it fucked 6 purple Pikmin off a ledge. Whoops. There was also this part where the groink got blown up, but the treasure he dropped somehow managed to fly all the way over to a different room, meaning I had to go over there to get us. With some expert distraction tactics and white Pikmin, it wasn't very subterranean complex to collect.
Oh, brother!
I forgot there were usually tree treasures on that floor, not 2, so I was extremely confused when I thought the game decided to cap the cave off with a fight against the pileated Snagrus. We also saw some scales again right at our base, but they thankfully didn't break anything. Back to the pileated Snagret, it was fine. There's a few other Snagrets around, but it's open enough to where you can just lead the pileated Snagret away from them. It did give me uncomfortable memories of the Snagret hole though. I'd completely forgotten that floor even existed until now. My brain was quick to repress that one. We get to see the man himself on sublevel 9 and his arena is clogged. Man at legs, my ass. You're always never using your legs and are casually letting your dwellings go to the dogs. The battery I got at the start of the game will have a higher price than the rent here after you get evicted from this dump. Not as much cleanup is needed as some of the previous fights, just tidy up one of the trenches and use us. Then it should be smooth sailing from there. Cheers. This looks like it'd be really fun to play through. That concludes the subterranean complex with only 19 Pikmin deaths. For a cave I was holding off on doing for so long, I was very surprised to see that this was and likely is the easiest cave in the entire mod. Obviously, I don't have to tell you that easiest doesn't mean easy. I mean, look at some of this stuff. But compared to every other cave, it was mostly fine. It strays pretty closely to a lot of the original floors, so if you know what to do for those, you'll know what to do here. Plus, some floors ended up being easier than their vanilla game counterparts. After that, we fully finished up 3 of the areas and 11 caves. The only thing left is the last area, and while we may be at the end, we're far from finished. The last area, the Wistful Wild, is infamous in the original Pikmin 2 for having the hardest overworld section, a treasure that requires 100 purple Pikmin to carry, and 3 of the most long and grueling caves the game has to offer, with some of these floors looking like they came out of this mod. This area really pushes your limits, so I already know that this is where we'll be dealing with some of the most difficult content this mod has to offer. I said that a treasure there, the Doomsday Apparatus, needs 100 purple Pikmin, but how will we ever get such a gaudy amount of purple Pikmin?
Wahaha! It is I, the Gaudy Goon from Nintendo's most critically and commercially successful title, the Hey Pikmin game for the Nintendo 3DS family of systems. Here is my gaudy guide on obtaining over 100 purple Pikmin. Land into the perplexing pool and head into the cave known as the Watery Ways. You will have to go through 3 rotten sub-levels, filled with easy-to-navigate layouts and fair enemy placements that will leave your Pikmin as safe and sound as the sounds that come out of the Nintendo 3DS's speakers while playing the Hey Pikmin game for the Nintendo 3DS family of systems. On sub-level 4, you will reach the purple flowers that give you purple Pikmin. Then head for the exit, something you will never do while playing the Hey Pikmin game for the Nintendo 3DS family of systems. After a brief 35 minutes and 196 Pikmin deaths, you will find that you have obtained 100 purple Pikmin. You can also find the Wario amiibo for $15 on the Nintendo website, giving you access to the Gaudy Goon stage for the Hey Pikmin game for the Nintendo 3DS family of systems. Thank you for listening to my guide, and stay gaudy, goons!
Thanks, Gaudy Goon. Now that we have what we need, we can head to the final stop on our journey. I'm not even going to pretend to act surprised that the Doomsday apparatus was moved to the furthest possible point on the map. I saw that one coming as early as day one. I was expecting the final area to start off a lot more eventful, but no, not really. Mainly because usually you can split off between the two parts of the map, but now there's poison blocking off the bridge that lets you do that. You have to take a linear path now, which means a lot of sitting around waiting for high health walls to be destroyed. We don't get that far in the area because of this, though we do get 2 treasures. I don't want to speak too soon, but the enemy layout doesn't even seem to be that bad either. There's a bullbear instead of a groink, which is slightly worse, and then stuff like a hermit chromad instead of a cannon beetle, which is definitely not worse. Boring first day, actually. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's real nice. The burrowing Snagra can't get hit by the boulders. Well, it can, but it won't do any damage. This is pretty tricky, but if you just hit them both with some bitter spray and take out the cannon beetle, things should be fine. Looks like he had one last trick up his sleeve before he died. By the time we reach the poison bridge, we've basically done everything in the area except collect the final 3 treasures. To reach the mushroom, we can either break down this poison gate and get through the orange bulborb family, or break down this electric gate where you have to go through tons of entirely optional anode builds for a longer route to the same orange bulborb family. I feel the answer here is obvious. They don't even know what hit them. The other treasure was inside of that snagret we saw earlier, and we all know what the final treasure here is. It's been half its weight this whole fucking time? I did all of that grinding, all of the work to get 100 purple Pikmin, and you're telling me it was for nothing? Call me insane, but this feels more insulting than if it was the original weight of 1,000. I did all of this grinding for no reason. Since when was Lands of Torture for people who didn't try? I guess I should have checked before getting all of those purple Pikmin, but why would I assume that the game named Pikmin 2, Lands of Torture, would suddenly make the Doomsday apparatus easier to collect after its previous good deeds, such as making us fight the Emperor Bullblacks 9 times in a row? Well, we've done everything in the Wistful Wilds overworld, plus we have a huge supply of purple Pikmin to burn through. All that's left are the caves, though not with these spicy spray numbers. Back to the Awakening Wood, but just to get some sprays and give the Dualbug a sentimental goodbye for the last time. Unless the Cavern of Chaos has hands. Okay, this is no time for jokes. 29 bitter sprays and 11 spicy sprays, that should be good. All that is left is the stuff I've been dreading the most, the 3 caves in the Wistful Wild. Might as well start with the first one, the Cavern of Chaos. Okay, we'll just go get some more. Anyways, might as well start with the first one, the Cavern of oh please. Might as well start with the first one, just get in the fucking cave. I like this intro floor. Well, I don't, but I like how blunt it is. Practically saying, yes, these caves are going to be as bad as you think they will be. A giant maze with right off the bat a bullbear who silently stalks you, ensuring he intervenes at the exact point it'd be the most inconvenient for you. Then there's Bulborb larvae constantly falling from the sky, with tons of female sheargubs around to try and push your Pikmin into them. Especially effective since you'll usually be dismissing your squad to kill the larva with just your captain. Top that off with a lot of sheargrub and dwarf bullbear spam in an extremely hard to navigate layout, and you have yourself a rather grueling floor that I am shocked I got through deathless. Oh brother. I foolishly thought that I could just fight the man at legs on his own, not knowing that the blowhogs had planned full assault tactics that required them to line up in position to interfere with the fight. At least that was just the practice run, now I know to clean up the arena for the next fight. Turns out that guy was just base. Run, purple, run. Not even the emergency bitter spray was stopping this guy. I had to whip out that extremely risky purple Pikmin cheese. I don't care how many Pikmin jimmies tell me this allegedly thwarts the fiery Bulblacks every single time. It's so dangerous. Just look at this. Why does everyone have a little hat trick today on this sub-level? He's meant to whip out his gun like that if you haven't attacked him for a while. Not the second he wakes up and you are actively attacking him. I didn't want to use a bitter spray on him since it'd be a bit of a waste, but I didn't feel like fighting him normally after the disrespect on display. Though I definitely didn't regret it, look at that drop. Another floor I miraculously did dentless, don't ask me how. Not today. I like how every time I somehow end up doing these near-perfect runs at the start of a cave, the game suddenly decides it's a good time to hold a Bulbman ice cream social. What is with all of these close calls? Holy shit! I'm actually familiar with these because I used to fill around with making some custom caves. Essentially, if you put falling boulders on a floor but don't configure them correctly, they just do that. I don't think it's any accident here though. I will compliment the fact that the mod does have a very deep understanding of how Pikmin 2 works. You can tell by how deliberate and niche the use case scenarios for some of the enemies get, along with the utilization of unused stuff like this. I know it's like complimenting the craftsmanship of a guillotine before it cuts my head off, but whatever. This floor is just sub-level 3 of the Cavern of Chaos, but the enemy count has been bumped way up. Though the creeping chrysanthemums and cloaking burrownets aren't particularly the worst to deal with. So I'd say this is the easiest floor so far. I can't get over these ridiculous boulders, that's just so comically unfair. Dentless again. I don't know who's blessing me to allow this to happen, but I have a feeling it might not last long. We also stumble upon a dual bug right at the end too. We've been awfully lucky in this cave. Another room filled with water and Emperor Bulblaxes. Here we go again. We also lost the dentless streak for this cave here. Thanks a lot, frog. Apparently it's not just Bulblaxes. Well, how are you gonna camp this time? There's nothing here for that. You took that a bit literally. How are you even going into the solid abyss? Thankfully though, we killed him before he took things too far and made this floor extremely tedious. The other treasure is inside an Emperor Bulblax, but due to there being dud bomb rocks around, we can very easily stun him, making him pretty easy to kill. All the treasures were condensed into this one room, meaning we got to skip quite a lot in this floor. I'll take it as an apology for having to fight the Emperor Bulblax 9 times in a row last time. We get a weird dip in difficulty for a sub-level 5, as this floor is just extremely brief and all of the enemies in this are spread out, except for this annoying Wally-hop who butted in while we were dealing with highly dangerous explosives. I don't even know how to describe this floor since it not only looks bizarre, but also doesn't really have anything going on. Feels like the enemies here were decided with a Tesco community fund. I had it beast in 2 minutes, which is a pretty big outlier for a floor clear in this game. I'd usually class a short floor in this mod as being around 6 minutes long to put it in perspective. You should have listened to my commands. We've seen the wall pulls before, but here they get a pretty major harmful application, which is jolting across several rooms really fast and potentially leading Pikmin into water where they will drown. This is actually the second time they've used the wall pulls in a negative way, and I do find it commendable that they somehow managed to find 2 separate ways of making this completely harmless and forgettable enemy into a nuisance. For the rest of the floor, if you ignore how grossly overtuned some of the enemies such as the water dumbles are, this is actually a good layout for a sub-level. There's a lot of hazards around, which means you'll have to bring Pikmin across the water using these platforms. In fact, this sublevel actually makes better use of the layout than the floor it's based off of in that regard. Plus, the dynamic with the wall pulls, while weird, was actually interesting, forcing you to get creative with your squad composition since you can't leave Pikmin just laying around idle at base. Okay. Well, there's only so many times Bubble Buddy can show up before it begins to lose its initial shock value. Weirdly enjoyable floor, actually. It's like the mod heard that I was having the slightest bit of fun and immediately went, "We hear you loud and clear and have resolved that issue fully." If you saw the second floor of the Dream Den and wanted it to be repeated until it was a giant maze, while also having the tiny snow bulborbs replaced with careening dirigibugs, then the gates are probably going to be bolted shut when you die, but also you're in luck since this sublevel is exactly that. My first instinct was to use purple Pikmin since they're strong, but don't bother. They can't get anything done in time while avoiding the Groink's line of fire. Instead use white Pikmin since they're far better at avoiding both the bullets and bombs and will actually have a better damage output because of this. Then you have to kill the Groinks with yellow Pikmin and be sure to use a bitter spray unless you have 60 yellows on hand. How are they getting worse? I tried to flank the Gatling Groink with just yellows this time after a tiny bit of cleanup, but the treasure weighs 15 and we only have 12 yellows. This thankfully doesn't mean the floor is impossible since we can throw a purple up there with a bit of effort, but it does mean we have to do a lot more additional cleanup to transport the treasure safely. Very rough floor overall. Right after dealing with Gatling Groink spam, we have to deal with Gatling Groink spam. Most of this floor is spent at our base in lockdown, clearing out all of the enemies that come over to lay siege there. The last one we had to deal with was a particularly annoying Groink. I've said it before that the Groinks don't really precisely follow you, and they instead kind of stalk you a bit until they're in a fully advantageous position, and you can definitely see it with this guy. He'd spend most of his time camping near a poison pipe with some dwarf bulborbs around him, and any attempt to get him to leave there so we could safely kill him, he'd turn around to hide behind a wall, no matter how desperately I tried to get his attention back. After all of that, the rest of the floor is just clearing out some dwarf bulborbs until we find the treasure, which ended up being inside of a bread bug. This floor was more tedious than anything. Sublevel 9 uses the wall pull trick we saw earlier, though it's even more impactful here due to how much water there is, and also how little room there is to move any non-blue Pikmin around in the first place. Since we can't really leave our Pikmin idle for that long, we'd have to bring the majority of our squad with us to deal with hazards, and with how little space there is here, that could obviously lead to disaster. So it's better to find alternative means to deal with hazards, such as having the careening dirigibugs blow them up. As you could also probably see, this pool is brimming with life. It feels like a petri dish in here. However, it's not as bad as it looks, since most of the rooms here are optional, and even if they weren't, the prevalence of dirigibugs means there won't be much clutter for long. We have to deal with a burrowing Snagrus and a beady Longlegs, which are a little hard to find thanks to an antenna beetle, but even with him there, you'd probably be able to figure out where the treasures are fairly quickly. Fine enough floor, surprisingly. Is this water ever going to be real? We have to fight a segmented Crobster while there's some snitch bugs flying around. Been there and seen that. I was pretty fixated on the bumbling snitch bug since he's probably a bigger threat than the actual boss. I left another captain near enough if we needed to be bailed out, and eventually just hit him with a bitter as the Crobster was stunned to get him out of the way. The swooping snitch bugs are far more inconsequential this time since we have the Pluckaphone, allowing us to very quickly uproot any Pikmin they catch. After that, we defeated the segmented Crobster, a little underwhelming actually. With how much we saw him earlier, I would have expected there to be several here. This guy goes down easily enough, and he also has a treasure, which I quickly grab since I don't know how many other Crobsters are here. It's the Brute Knuckles, which you usually get in the Frontier Cavern off of a random Mamuta. No clue why. They give you a stronger punch after punching 3 consecutive times, not too useful as the punch has been nerfed to shit in this mod. I was curious how many Crobsters were here, and it turns out there's a grand total of 3. I'd say that was a fine floor overall, but the layout definitely provides the potential for absolute disaster. The final floor is a filler one, probably the most boring one so far. I killed a Bullman though for the giggles. It's like we didn't lose any Pikmin at all. That was definitely the hardest cave so far, though I somehow only lost Ace Pikmin. I'm not bringing that up just to brag about how much of a fucking epic gamer I am. I'm genuinely surprised we got through most of this cave that unscathed, considering some of these ridiculous floor layouts. I was actually more entertained than I should have been throughout this cave, actually. Probably some form of Stockholm Syndrome, but I did enjoy a good few of these floors. If you ever wanted to sympathize with the 8-year-old coal miner, this is the mod for you, because straight after the exhaustion of clearing out a grueling cave, we're delving right into another one. The enemies have respawned here, so getting to the cave is a bit of a hike, and of course we have this guy, who I chose to just cheese by keeping my Pikmin up here, going to the entrance, and entering the second everyone has whistled. Anyways, time for the Hole of Deaths. Damn! Oh look, the treasure is right next to us. Seems like we are in for an easy start. I want to use just yellow Pikmin to deal with this guy, but it is obviously a complete nightmare trying to find space to split up our squad. Even when there is space, it doesn't last long. However, this guy's harassment tactics have caught up to him, as once we do get our yellows, he stays right at our base to hound us down. That means he's away from all of the other enemies, and he also drops the treasure in a safe location where we can easily nab it before the 500 bread bugs do. That made this floor pretty trivial, thankfully. I guess we were in for an easy start after all. Sublevel 2 looks really difficult, but it isn't. This cave follows the Hole of Heroes structure of having strictly one treasure per non-rest floor, meaning half this floor ends up being useless, and while enemy layouts like these look absolutely dreadful, everyone just kind of ends up dying. They all just die with minimal involvement from us. You can tell they only ever intended to use the cannonballs in more open spaces, since their boulders freak out in these more dense floors, often leading to them killing themselves on accident. Ends up being one of the easiest sublevels in the mod thanks to this. Due to this cave sticking to the Hole of Heroes structure, I at least know how many floors it will probably be, and won't get blindsided by the Hole of Heroes suddenly being like 72 floors long, and leaving me a decrepit old shell of my former self. Sublevel 3 is engineered to be as annoying as possible, with several blowhogs and volatile dweevils that activate as soon as they spawn in. Bitter spray is obviously very helpful. In fact, I'd go further and say that most times it's mandatory for saving yourself from the volatile dweevils in this mod, as there will be instances where there is essentially nowhere you can go to avoid them. The rest of the floor is covered in fire and water, but I just got lazy and forced my white Pikmin to dash through the fire and flames to grab us. It only killed 2 of them. Sublevel 4 is usually the one with the pileated snagret, so I'm obviously feeling queasy. Oh, that's real nice. Quick, kill him before the pileated snagret shows up. Quick, quick! Oh, he has the treasure? Where's the snagrets? Are they not here? Well, they are here, but they're all outside of the arena. I think the mod bit off more than it could chew here, since it tried to have several arenas spawned in, but it just led to most of the snagrets spawning outside of them. We also got lucky with our base, as not only was the treasure next to us, but we also got this strange open hallway near us where we could manage our Pikmin squad. This is better than a dead end, since it's more spacious, and also because all of the dead ends here have those instant boulders that would have halved our Pikmin squad if we went near them. This is usually a rest floor, and I guess it kind of still is since there's no treasure, but I mean, who am I kidding? The exit isn't clogged, however, so you can just dash for us. Just be sure to keep a close eye on your Pikmin. There are some goodies scattered about, but I don't know, the butterflies that could potentially drop a spray out of bounds where we won't be able to reach it weren't really enticing me to bring my Pikmin over here. I was so eager to leave, I forgot about that little tidbit about the water rates not displaying on the treasure gauge correctly. I'm sure that won't come back to bite me in the ass. No foreshadow thing, so I guess it didn't. Sublevel 6 is meant to be a remix of the original floor, but due to the not 1 but 2 Gatling groinks they put in here, it ends up feeling more like Dream than Sublevel 10. I'd be upset about this floor, especially these insane maneuvers we have to pull off here in order to counteract this guy's camping strategies. But considering how this floor already feels like Dream Den Sublevel 10, I'm more worried about what artistic vision the mod has for that floor. I'm running out of reactions at this point. This is just Bitter Spray, the floor. It was helpful for the groinks here, but now it's necessary to deal with the constant tag teams that Pileated Snagret keeps making. I mean, if you didn't have Bitter Spray, how are you meant to cope with a yellow Wallyhop and a Pileated Snagret bundled together, aside from a noose? I like how this floor is characterized. The other ones were doing all of this without remorse, but this one seems almost sorry for what it's putting us through. We had that generous spray drop, but also the first thing you see upon landing is several blue candy pop buds along with a queen candy pop bud. It feels apologetic in a way. This floor is just a mess. Even spamming bitter spray is barely going to help you since it misses a few of the enemies, who will end up wreaking havoc on you as you try to deal with the petrified ones. There's nowhere to go either, and you just kind of have to wait for certain enemies to be semi-isolated so you can kill them. And then maybe if the stars align, the ranging Boister will eventually be isolated and you can finish the floor. Joyless Jewel. Me too, Jewel. The first 5 floors were actually surprisingly easy, but it picked up really quick, like practically a complete 180 in difficulty. There's not even a strategy to this one, just complete and utter chaos, which obviously didn't end well. They have some fucking nerve to play rest music as if this is actually going to be a rest floor where I can relax and grow up some Pikmin in peace. We at least get some Bulbmen. I can't stay mad for too long when one of them is pretending to be a choo-choo train. That's just adorable. There's also some Doodlebugs and Glimpials, but good luck catching them. Sublevel 9 is the Sparta floor from the original game. I don't even know if the kids nowadays know what that means. It did a hilarious thing where it spawned the enemy with the treasure, which was a fiery Bulbax, in water where we could kill it immediately. Getting my hopes up thinking I'd just leave instantly, but no, we have to deal with this. They don't even wait for the gate to be fully broken down, they just vault right over it to chase us. Again, Bitter Spray doesn't even come in clutch as purple Pikmin still end up dying. This wasn't the worst layout we could have gone since we did get to skip a good chunk of the floor, but even then, it's horrible. Cool. We get another pretty lucky layout since the Emperor Bulbax with the treasure spawned right by us, though even if he hadn't, it'd probably be easy enough to track down the one we need. They also pulled the same Matai trick as the original floor, though we wiped out the Emperors quick enough so that didn't matter. Also, speaking of basing stuff off the original, this has probably been the most derivative cave so far, as most of these floors have just done the original layout except bigger with some additional tweaks. Makes it a bit more bland compared to the other caves in my opinion. I kinda knew what I was in for most of these, aside from the pretty obvious curveballs. Next up is the Empress Bulbax, a new evolutionary variant in fact that has foregone the need for a face, and instead now has 2 reproductive organs to shoot out even more children. This is pretty stressful to deal with, but the Empress still has a weirdly low amount of health, so even 2 of them go down in a shockingly quick amount of time. We're not done yet though, there's a whole other arena that has plenty of time to assemble a child army that would make Nestle blush. There's a little trick though. After the Empresses have produced a certain amount of larvae, they'll go back to sleep until you start killing them. If we hit them with a bitter spray, we have enough time to make a dash to the clogged hole while mostly avoiding the horde. Hey Bulbaxes, I've been working on this video for a month and I really need the ad revenue. Can we not? That was definitely an interesting floor. This one's usually a rest floor, but I forgot that the vanilla game just throws a treasure in there because, I don't know. Shiggy said the game couldn't come out without a fully completed set of gyros. Because of that, instead of a vague interpretation of a rest floor, we just get a straight up floor. At least the cave's been generous with the Pikmin handouts, we'd probably be at like 50 or 40 Pikmin without them. Do you mind? Thank you. He has the treasure and the rest of them are likely duplicates, so I'm just leaving. Oh, you idiots. I've gotten so good at overly cautiously wrangling my Pikmin that I forgot how busted their detection radius was for the bosses in this mod. Olimar, you have Pikmin. You don't need to bare knuckle the enemies, just throw the Pikmin. We are not doing this again, fuck off. That's brutal. I spend the first part of the floor chasing after this Flintbeal like a complete savage fiend. I'm not letting you get away with the spicy spray. The rest of the floor is the Man at Legs arena, but with a bunch of stuffiness, an entirely new and original concept of which the likes we've never seen. Just use purple Pikmin to clear out the mess and then fight the Man at Legs, which is made trivial with spicy spray. Then the remainder of the sublevel is just identical clones of this. Well, sorry for checking up on the well-being of my good friend Olimar. It's very natural that this mod punishes you for being selfless. Sublevel 14 is the beady longlegs refight, but with a lot of additional hazards thrown into the mix, which would make this floor an absolute nightmare, but since we've been given an ample amount of bulbmen, this ends up being one of the easiest floors so far, as we only have to worry about the boss fight, which is pretty easy. Yeah, it's not yours. Oh, my bad. They've also been keen on the duplicate treasures towards the latter half of this cave, but as said earlier, they stick to the formatting of one treasure per floor, so they really don't do anything at all. Just let them pass the fence and hit them with a bitter spray. Another one where I don't even know what you do aside from using bitter spray. After that, it's just a regular fight against the raging longlegs. No tricks up his sleeve this time, he didn't camp anywhere, and another one didn't fall when I thought I was finished. It's just a pretty regular fight, but I won't complain that much. Then we get the Breadbug Jamboree for the final filler floor. Fun to look at, I guess. That was probably the hardest cave so far, but it was a pinch better than what I was expecting. I was even able to beat it in one sitting, which surprised me, but still, it was brutal and miserable. Also, it's a weird thing to say, but this cave didn't feel quite as refined as the ones before us, if that makes sense. I'm wondering if the mod has begun to run out of steam a little, so we'll just have to see what the Dream Den holds. Speaking of the Dream Den, we have now officially done everything except the Dream Den, so the finish line is in sight. We definitely need more sprays, so for the second time after I said my grand goodbyes and acted like we'd never see it again, we're back at the Awakening Wood. This time though, it really is a swan song, as it's the last time we'll be seeing this area, and someone is definitely dying in the Dream Den, that's for certain. Okay, that's just ridiculous. We capped the day off with 30 bitter sprays and 19 spicy sprays. Plus, I'd collect the Dwarf Bullbear's corpses every time we had to kill them, and we got up to exactly 1,000 Pikmin. This is probably the last time you'll be actively growing Pikmin, so it's a nice number to end it on. Well, to commemorate our journey, I took in the Awakening Wood in all of its glory as the sunset timer counted down, reminding me of how far we'd come and how the time we have left in this mod is also counted. Can I talk? You know what, with that attitude, I won't sit out the sunsets. Yeah, I'll miss you guys too, I guess. Warning. The upcoming cave contains flashing graphics for most of its runtime. Viewer discretion is advised. We're back in the Wistful Wild, and it's finally time to go to the endpoint of our journey. That obviously being the cloaking Burrowness who breaks down a bridge. Get out of my way. We've reached the actual endpoint, that being the Dream Den. We've just got to sneak past this orange bulb. I thought we watched that cutscene already. Okay, we're here, the Error Den. Time to end this once and for all. What exactly am I meant to be looking at? A few floors were kind of weird with their layouts and aesthetics before, but this one is actively hideous to look at. It actually hurts my eyes, more than the two groins I immediately see upon landing. That's obviously a bit of an issue. I tried to lure the bumbling snitch bug out of there, which is basically impossible to do without also attracting the attention of the crobster. So I decided to just kill him as the crobster was stunned, which will obviously happen when he hits the tower and all of our purple Pikmin are dead. Okay, you win this round, Error Den. After walking all the way back and getting harassed by even more enemies this time, we're inside the Error Den again. And I'd like to say I know exactly what to do this time, but that would be a lie. I didn't know if the floor outside of the meld stuff was solid or not, so I consulted this Groink, but he just kinda left me more confused than I already was. We run into the crobster again, who didn't have a bumbling snitch bug in his little den, but he did have scales. We were actually able to deal with him flawlessly. Perfect. However, there's apparently still a treasure here, so I have to head over to face another crobster. Where's the treasure? It's a bit late in the game to be pulling this nonsense. I didn't know the name Error Den would be a warning. I don't know if this treasure is a duplicate or not, and I guess we'll never know. I have to reset and do the whole floor over again thanks to this. I'm sorry for making you look at this floor for so long. We do the first Crobster fight again and then have to try bait a bumbling snitchbug out of the arena, which is easier since I know approximately where the Crobster's personal bubble is, and it leads to some truly riveting gameplay. Oh, come on. The supposed treasure is freaking out again and is nowhere to be found, so I guess it's on purpose. This is the error den, after all. What a horrific start. I was originally planning to chug through this cave in one sitting, but after the egregious amount of time it took just to get through sublevel 1, I decided to turn the game off and head to an entirely different dream den. But while I was there, I was given time to think about whatever happened with the treasure on that floor, and I came up with a theory. The reason these treasures seem to not be spawning is because they were duplicate treasures. Usually the duplicate treasures are all spawned in at once, but I think that time they were actually set to spawn inside of the Crobsters. And I found it suspicious that the treasure always spawned on the very first Crobster we killed. Usually when you collect a treasure, it's set to never spawn again, which wouldn't impact the usual duplicate treasures we saw, as they all get spawned in at the start of the floor, but for the ones inside of enemies, they have to spawn after the enemy is killed. So I figure if you collect the treasure before spawning all the duplicates, it just won't spawn after the enemy is killed. But the treasure gauge will still act like it's there for some reason. In fact, one of the few floors we saw with duplicate treasures inside of enemies was the second floor at the Citadel of Spiders, where if you remember, the treasure detection for the Pikmin was also completely messed up, which adds to my theory. Anyways, the second floor ended up having a lot of Gatling groinks inside of these structures, which all had duplicate treasures. I held off on collecting any of them throughout the floor until it was fully cleared and they all spawned in with no issue, and the treasure gauge worked perfectly fine, so I think my theory was correct. So for the final cave in the game, we have to deal with duplicate treasures again, except with a new twist that makes them far more obnoxious. I killed all of the groinks, which because of where they're placed, they are very hard to hiss and can easily knock Pikmin into the abyss. Meaning the only way to take them out is usually using bitter spray or purple Pikmin spams if they're in somewhere open enough. The sprays do make them easy, but I'd like to be using those somewhere else, such as the final boss maybe. This floor also has weird visuals, which thankfully aren't an absolute eyesore to look at, but this time they do actually have gameplay ramifications. It can be pretty hard to gauge where airborne enemies precisely are due to you not being able to see their shadows, and also those bullshit Mike Tyson boulders are back, except since you can't see their shadows, there is zero telegraph for them at all. I got lucky since the first one spawned a bit away from me and I very quickly scouted out the floor with one Pikmin afterwards, but they could definitely lead to a disaster if you don't see them coming. Overall, this floor was really difficult and tedious, taking 20 minutes to beat. We at least know what the rules are starting on sublevel 3, so it can avoid having to spend a ridiculous amount of time clearing out the floor. We have to face off against an Emperor Bulblax to get a treasure, which is usually on the previous floor. I kill another to check if they all have the same pencil, which it seems they do, so I get us and head for the exit, but then the treasure gauge picks up again in a spot with no Bulblaxes. This is just a load of nonsense. We have a Cannonball larva, a Hermit Chromad, and a Fire Geyser fused into one hateful entity. Not even fellow enemies are safe from its wrath. Not even itself is safe from its wrath. Turns out all of that was actually useless, as there either was no treasure or one of the enemies had the same pencil which didn't spawn in. So I headed to the exit, but not alone unfortunately. Sublevel 4 is this giant dense maze filled with bulbears and also silly water, which the game just dumps you into. All of your Pikmin can walk over it, but sometimes they fall in and usually pop right out. On my first attempt here, I resetted the game because I thought the floor was busted. The treasure gauge was going off here and there were no enemies there. The treasure wasn't showing up at all. However, it turns out it actually wasn't busted. These dwarf bulbears gave the game away on the next attempt. I know I've been pushing the no reset rule quite a bit, but these floors are getting abstract enough to where it's hard to tell if they're breaking or working as intended. I do always end up in a significantly worse position every time I do reset to see if something's wrong, so I've not been getting one over on the game by doing this. Also, unless with some insane trial and error, or if you know the game's inner workings, which I did, good luck ever finding out that you're meant to slam a purple Pikmin on the ground in order to trigger the flag for the Bulbear to fall from the sky. I haven't even mentioned the absolutely abhorrent enemy layout aside from the Bulbears. Every spot is crammed with several Wally Hops and Water Dumples. If you want to keep your Pikmin safe in a dead end, a Bulbear will come and eat Pikmin through a wall. Worst floor by far, and that's saying something. Do I have to sit here and explain why this is bad? Tree larvae get spawned every 2 seconds and there's nowhere to lead them to. Even just standing still can't ward them off, they cover too much ground and at least one pack of them will be heading towards your Pikmin. Another one where we'll have to just barge in with no strategy. Really? It's just spamming our Pikmin and sprays to clear up the Empresses as fast as possible, and then taking out the raging Longlegs, which is actually fine this time aside from when he's near the Empresses, as it's an actual arena. There's nowhere for him to camp. Oh, hey Timmy, what are you playing on your GameCube? Oh, don't mind me, Dad, I'm playing grass. There's a bunch of sheer grubs in here and I can't see where they are, plus there are 2 larvae here waiting to jump us. Just a very memorable mess of a floor. Sublevel 6 is a rest floor. Usually these are kind of a pleasant surprise, but now it's like, yeah, better be a fucking rest floor. Obviously they do have to make it as annoying as possible by having tons of withering blowhogs and volatile dweevils that drop from the sky, but compared to everything else here, it is pretty relaxing. You do get one of every candy pop bud along with 3 queen candy pop buds, so we are able to get our Pikmin count back up to 100. I took a break to watch Mamuta. That was fun. Sublevel 7, aside from the rest floor, obviously is the easiest floor so far by a landslide. It's another one of those sublevels where everyone just kind of ends up killing each other with minimal involvement on your end. I think the only thing I actually fought with Pikmin was this singular cannon beetle. Again with these bizarre layouts, this floor's unconventional aesthetic feels like something conventional that's being twisted around and turned into something unconventional. It doesn't feel like something that exists, but because the thought exists of the existing floor not existing, the non-existent must exist. Oh, I really missed you, pileated Snaggerus, glad you were able to make us. If you ignore the rude start and us the hairy Bulborb that decides he's the hero of the day, this floor isn't the worst. I think aside from all of the extra crap this floor has, a pileated Snaggerit fight with jelly floats in the arena could definitely work. The weirdest thing here is this grass section on top of the sinking sand arena, which just decides on a whim whether it has collision or not, and who gets affected by it. Your captain can stand on top of it at times, but none of your Pikmin will, so you just can't throw any Pikmin to stop the giant bird from killing them. Once you adjust to that though, it's fine. I just want a fucking egg. Straight to the exit it is. This sublevel is just actually mind-numbing. I had no thoughts flowing through my head while playing this one. It is just so comically abhorrent that it is hard for the human mind to even process properly. I mean, just listen to the game audio. The treasure is in an Emperor Bulblax, but there's like 50 things that can mess up the fight that you have to clear up. He eventually just got woken up by accident, and I fought him then and there, which went kinda smoothly. This somehow only took 9 minutes despite feeling like 30. Just another horrific floor. Sublevel 10 is the Dweevil Maze, except it is even bigger than the original floor, plus it's filled with swooping snitchbugs and beady longlegs. This is another floor where there's usually several treasures, but now there's only one, and you aren't going to know that until you comb through the entire floor. It's probably been pretty obvious at this point, but no, I have not been using any sort of guide. I don't even know if one exists. You wouldn't need a guide for most of this mod, but for shit like this, you definitely want one. Nobody wants to sit down and search through an entire floor like this. There's also way more antenna builds here who trough the treasure gauge and also do stuff like this. The whole of Heroes was long, but this is the cave that truly feels grueling to get through. All of these floors have taken pieces out of me one by one. Probably the most demoralized I've felt while playing, despite the end being in sight. We get the Emergence cave layout for sublevel 11, but the lead up to the large circular part has a lot of shearwigs and also some snagrets. That's all pretty inconsequential compared to what it's leading up to though. Yep, 3 Raging Longlegs in a row. I know from the very start that we'll only have to kill one of them, but even then, sectioning them off is pretty difficult, and they are able to inflict massive casualties. At this point, I hadn't ruled out just hitting an exit geyser if we see one, as our sprays are dwindling, our Pikmin are dwindling, and our captain's health is dwindling too. I kill one of them and sneak past the other 2 while collecting the treasure because why would I ever bother to fight them? Salvation. More Pikmin. More sprays. Better luck next time, Olimar. Fitting this takes place in the sewer since I felt like I just left Shawshank when I got here. You get tons of sprays here, and this gave me the boost to carry on since we are approaching the end anyways. Well, that was the rest floor. Say, what floor is up to be remixed next? It was like sub-level... Oh no. I think that prior rest floor was just to stock you up with the sprays necessary to manage this floor alone, since it would be practically impossible without them. I don't even think that's hyperbole. If you had no access to sprays, it would probably be practically impossible to beat this floor while still having sufficient Pikmin numbers for the following ones. Look how many Wally Hops are by our base, and there's more falling from the sky. Thankfully, getting the treasure is extremely quick. It's in every single one of the several groinks, and it's basically guaranteed one will be near you in a timely manner. Then you just have to dash to the exit while ignoring a frog, while also ensuring Olimar doesn't get shot dead via firing squad just as you're about to leave. Sublevel 14 is actually easy in hindsight, but it's also fucking infuriating, and is absolutely horrible to go through after everything else you've had to put up with. Basically, there's 2 distinct treasures and a bunch of bread bugs, so you just have to kill off the bread bugs who steal the treasures. My Pikmin just kept missing, or getting shoved by the bread bugs while trying to hit them. Even when standing still and aiming at the exact same spot where I already hit one, they somehow managed to miss. Like, it's not on me at this point. I'd usually have the patience for this, but after some of the most asinine sublevels I've ever seen, I just don't. We do get lucky since this giant bread bug set his nest right at our base and he ended up stealing both of the treasures, so we did not have to do an awful amount of work here, but still it was so annoying. Sublevel 15, we're nearly there. This here looked like the opposite of amazing. I've exhausted my inventory of negative terms if you couldn't tell, but we can actually lead this guy into an isolated hallway away from everyone else, making it a pretty painless fight. Then the other treasure's location wasn't really much of a secret. I mentioned way back how I hated snagret spam mainly because of the noises, but putting up with antennabule spam for several floors that sounds like this has made me miss it a bit. Leaving the floor ended up being harder than getting the treasures since everyone had a chronic lack of minding their own business. And I don't even know how you'd reasonably clean up these enemies without calling in an airstrike or splitting an atom. The last treasure that isn't related to the final boss is on floor 16, the Hypno Platter. It's the same as the original floor but way bigger and also has whatever is going on here. There's some Queen Candy Bot Buds allowing us to get up to 100 Pikmin, and we are now officially at the end. Regardless of what we'll have to deal with for the final boss, this was by far the hardest cave we've had to go through. This is probably the hardest cave I've ever had to go through in any Pikmin hacker game. It is vicious from start to end. Anyways, now it's time to finish it off. Well, at least we can see. You know what I want to do when I reach the final boss? I want to have most of the time spent not fighting the final boss, and instead spent dealing with bread bugs who zip around in ways that let them perfectly avoid our throws. Can we fight the final boss, please? Oh, piss off. Unfortunately, I think I ended up vastly underestimating this. In my head, we just quickly take out one of the Titan Dweevils, none of the other ones would be woken up, and we just win the mod and be remembered in the Hall of Fame. But no, of course that doesn't happen. Of course these dwarf bull bears get involved, of course every single Titan Dweevil gets woken up. Of course a beady Longlegs comes out of nowhere, of course our Pikmin squad gets absolutely devastated, and of course the man at legs stays sound asleep during all of this. It's just havoc. I don't even know how to describe any of this, but I think the footage does all of the talking, really. It's been hard to talk about the Titan Dweevil himself since there's just so much shit going on, but basically he has 4 treasures equipped to him, plus a Louis, and he alternates between the 4 for his attacks, each representing one of the core hazards. Obviously he usually does 1 attack at a time, but since there's 4 of them, we just have to put up with a whole barrage of elements. This goes on for a while with no real progress, and eventually I just accept we'll have to throw in the towel and try again. We did actually knock the monster pump off of one of them, which I grabbed before leaving since that means the next time we're here they won't have us. That's good since this attack is already annoying in vanilla, but here since they can all do it at once, they just unleash a fucking spell card like we're storming the Scarlet Devil Mansion. The Shock Therapist was also dropped, but I didn't collect it since we're fighting these guys with yellow Pikmin, who are fully immune to us, and them using it is actually advantageous. That's actually the reason we're using yellows and why I was collecting so many of them throughout the cave. They can reach the Titan Dweevil's treasures the easiest, and are also fully immune to his worst attack. On my way to leave, while I was expecting just 1 filler floor, it instead turns out that there's actually several floors, and we have a choice on where we want to fight the Titan Dweevil. That would have been nice to know earlier. The last 2 floors are absolute rubbish. Sublevel 20 has no advantages to it in the slightest, and 19 does only have 1 Titan Dweevil, but he's in water and there's like a million swooping snitch bugs. Sublevel 18 though, while having some bosses, has by far the most amount of space and only 3 Titan Dweevils who are spread out well enough, so we could realistically only fight one of them if we're careful. Anyways, I leave the cave keeping all the treasures we collected so far. 175 Pikmin debts. 175. I guess the reason everyone was mad at me in the Awakening Wood is because I keep coming back every time I say it's the last time. Well, it will be the last time because I went overboard with the spray grinding, spending a whole 2 days here to ensure that no matter what happens I will have enough sprays. Now all that's left to do is to go back to the Titan Dweevil. No biggie, we only have to go through 17 floors to get back to where we were. I was expecting the crawl back to the Titan Dweevil to be an absolute struggle that would take forever and leave me in tears, but it turned out to be fine enough. Floors like sublevel 4 and 13, which I expected to be absolute nightmares, turned out to be annoying but not really the worst. And the prevalence of Queen Candy Pop buds means there's a lot of room for error. Plus, one of the contributing factors I stocked up on so many sprays was because of some of these floors, and spamming sprays for them with no regard to how much of them I was using made a lot of these easy enough to blast through. In fact, I don't think I even really used an absurd amount of sprays. Plus, we obviously get extras on that rest floor, so there's no need to be that conservative with them. Eventually we got to sublevel 16, which had a really good layout that allowed us to reach everything we needed with little work. I stock up on some extra yellow Pikmin, convert some of my blue Pikmin into purples, who I brought so we'd have extra insurance for carrying the treasures, and I was ready to finally finish this mod once and for all. We're obviously skipping past sublevel 17 because there's no way in hell I'm fighting anything in there. I already said I'm attempting sublevel 18, and I think this one makes a grace endpoint. There's several Snagrits, an Emperor Bullbacks, and a giant bread bug. The 3 pillars of Lands of Torture are here to give us a nice goodbye before we put a wrap on things. Clearing them out does take a bit of time, but it isn't intolerable. Well, except for the music. It doesn't play the boss music, they all play the Titan Dweevil's theme, but it glitches out a lot. In this case, it just played the flare cannon part on loop, which meant listening to this on repeat. There's a single isolated Titan Dweevil. Perfect. The battle has begun. I bring him over to this place as it serves as a great arena and immediately start targeting the Comedy Bomb, as it has the most range out of his currently available weapons. We thankfully don't have to put up with the monster pump at all since we collected it on our previous attempt, meaning our purple Pikmin are completely safe at our base. To keep up with us having to listen to the flare cannon jingle on repeat, he kept spamming us, but it is fairly easy to avoid and he ended up never using the Comedy Bomb thanks to this. I'd say his most deadly attack is actually his Shake, since as we've seen he has absurd knockback that can easily wake up the other Titan Dweevils. To avoid this, I'd hit him with a Bitter Spray just before his Shake, which gives us a lot more time to react and call our Pikmin off of it, as the timing is usually really harsh. I'm also making sure to be extremely precise with my whistle, as any Pikmin panicking could run over to the Titan Dweevil clump of death. We eventually take down the flare cannon, leaving him with just the shock therapist. The fight is basically over as long as we don't mess anything up. After a lot of spamming his only weapon to stall off time, it's knocked to the floor and he is on the ropes with no way of directly harming us. His only defense mechanism is a desperate last resource of trying to send our Pikmin over to his allies to get them involved, but it is thwarted by slamming him with a Bitter Spray and eventually... he's down. Whatever happened to Louie while he was away, it seems he has been fully cured of his pick-pick-card ailment. The last trick the mod has up its sleeve is making Louie weigh 80 Pikmin. So if you beat the fight by the skin of your teeth, you won't be able to collect him. However, we ended up demolishing the Titan, so it's no issue for us. Anyways, after waking up the other Titan Dweevils just to get one last glimpse of the utter chaos this mod has to offer, it is time to leave the lands of torture. If you count up the Pikmin deaths across this cave, we lost a total of 267 Pikmin. Obviously that was extremely difficult with some of the hardest floors, but who cares now, the mod's over. In total we lost 1,301 Pikmin. The Dwarf Bullbear was also the most frequent enemy we saw, to the point where we killed 655 of them. Those are obviously some insane statistics, and that is definitely the highest Pikmin death count we've had on the channel so far. In fact, I doubt it'll ever be beaten. Well anyways, that was Pikmin 2 Lands of Torture. I was going into this with the question of is it harder than Kaizo, the previous most difficult thing we did on this channel, and I was surprised how the answer very quickly just became an unambiguous yes. This was one of the most grueling game experiences I've had to go through. Kaizo did have a lot of frequent spam floors with tons of enemies, which I was expecting that it'd be hard to beat that, especially with how many low blows that mod throws at you, but no. Most of these floors are way worse, and even with the far smaller sublevel counts, these caves took much longer. The thing with the spam floors in Kaizo was that you can absent-mindedly chug through them if you're dedicated enough. The floors here, however, are really deliberate, and you have to be actively playing and thinking of what you're going to do. As for the mod's quality, it's hard to really contrast to other Pikmin games and mods, but compared to others in the niche genre of bullshit Pikmin 2 mods that are meant to annoy you, this is like the Mona Lisa. Everything here is planned out perfectly, and the game really utilizes every part of Pikmin 2, no matter how obscure. Basically every floor we went through was unique, which is an impressive feat. It is obviously agonizing to get through, but I actually enjoyed this mod a lot more than I thought I would, and left it with a good enough taste in my mouth. I do admire the craftsmanship that went into it. It's not just poorly planned spam, you can tell there was a lot of effort to make it as torturous as could be. Definitely the pinnacle of Pikmin 2 nonsense. Obviously, it's hard to recommend, but if you are a huge Pikmin 2 fan, you can get a kick out of this. Just be aware of what you're getting yourself into. Anyways, that was quite a lot of work, but at least I can relax. It's nothing but lost media now.